I must say that coming from you, all this lecture of violating the rules in this building is quite an impressive shoot. But as far as you repeated many times that the violation here is about President Zelensky speaking before the Council members, there is a solution for this if you agree. You stop the war and President Zelensky will not take the floor. So what made him here important and what makes important for all of us to hear him first and then discuss is made from you, not from us. Thank you very much. I take note and will continue with our session. You want the floor again? Okay.
Mr. President, I wish to draw your attention to the fact that you today are acting as President of the Security Council, not speaking in your national capacity as a representative of Albania. Your objective is to conduct a meeting as is enshrined in the rules of procedure of the Security Council instead of providing political assessments in your capacity as the President of the Security Council. Thank you.
I just responded to you after you addressing me as the Albanian Prime Minister and after you continuing to say incorrect things about what the procedure is here. If you don't want me to answer as an Albanian Prime Minister, don't provoke me as such. Anyhow, let's keep going now. The security, again, okay?
Mr. President, I turn to you only as the President of the Security Council. Not once did I turn to you as the Prime Minister of Albania. Once again, I stress, I'm engaged in a procedural dialogue with you, not in a substantive dialogue. Please refrain from political assessments at the beginning of your statement at the Council.
Yeah, it was you that talked about NATO, about Albania being in NATO, about NATO countries coming here, so all this has nothing to do with my role as President of the Council. Anyhow, can we now, with your permission, continue normally the session? Thank you very much. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S 2023/65/3, a letter dated 6 September 2023 from the Permanent Representative of Albania to the United Nations addressed to the President of the Security Council. I now give the floor to the Secretary General, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Gutierrez.
Mr. President, Excellencies, the United Nations Charter is our roadmap to a more peaceful world. The tools and mechanisms founded on the principles of the Charter are a how-to manual to resolve conflict. Together, our collective efforts over the years have contributed to preventing war on a global scale and saving millions of lives through peacemaking and preventing diplomacy, UN peacekeeping operations, disarmament and non-proliferation efforts, humanitarian and development programs, and activities to promote human rights. Cette semaine.
Just this week, the Sustainable Development Goals Summit agreed a rescue plan for the SDGs, an essential tool to prevent conflicts and crises of all kinds. Multilateralism works. It is essential and effective. But multilateral tools and mechanisms are weakening in the face of rising geopolitical tensions and challenges. Some are failing, while others, frameworks that are urgently needed, do not yet exist. The number of conflict-related deaths last year almost doubled. UN peace operations are under unprecedented strain. Nuclear disarmament is at a virtual standstill, and there are no adequate global frameworks to address the security threats posed by new technologies. I urge governments to go further and do better to recommit to their obligations under the UN Charter, to use the full range of diplomatic tools that it provides, to prioritize the prevention of conflict and crises, and to consider the proposals for new frameworks and tools in the new agenda for peace.
Mr. President, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, in clear violation of the United Nations Charter and international law, is aggravating geopolitical tensions and divisions, threatening regional stability, increasing the nuclear threat, and creating deep fissures in our increasingly multipolar world. All this comes at a time when cooperation and compromise for multilateral solutions are needed more than ever to tackle challenges from the climate crisis to unprecedented levels of inequality to disruptive technologies. The United Nations organs have been clear in condemning the war. The General Assembly overwhelmingly approved a resolution demanding that Russia leave Ukraine, and the second rejected Russia's effort to annex Ukrainian territory. I have consistently and repeatedly called for a just and sustainable peace in Ukraine, in line with the Charter and international law, for Ukraine, for Russia, and for the world. Russia's invasion was followed by relentless, systematic attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure and services, including health and education facilities. The war has killed or injured tens of thousands of civilians, destroyed lives and livelihoods, traumatized a generation of children, torn families and communities apart, devastated the economy, and turned vast areas of farmland into deadly minefields. Attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure must stop immediately. Nearly half of Ukraine's population, some 18 million people, need humanitarian assistance and protection. More than 6 million Ukrainians have fled the country. The United Nations has worked collectively to mitigate the impact on people, both in Ukraine and around the world, and to support civilians. Our humanitarian programs have stepped up, distributing aid to more than 8 million people this year, in partnership with over 450 humanitarian organizations, half of them Ukrainian. The International Atomic Energy Agency has established a presence at Zaporizhia nuclear plant and other major Ukrainian nuclear sites to monitor safety, security, and safeguards. Together with the International Committee of the Red Cross, we successfully organized the evacuation of civilians from the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol last year. Evidence of shocking and widespread human rights violations has been documented by UN agencies, including conflict-related sexual violence, arbitrary detentions, summary executions, mostly by the Russian Federation, and the forcible transfer of Ukrainian civilians, including children, to territory under Russian control or to the Russian Federation. This documentation is vital for accountability. And accountability for all human rights violations is crucial, in line with international norms and standards. Mr. President, the war contributed to an unprecedented surge in global food prices, threatening millions with hunger and poverty. Starting in July 2022, we succeeded in mitigating that impact through the Black Sea Initiative and the Memorandum of Understanding between the UN and the Russian Federation. During its one-year period of operation, the Black Sea Initiative, together with Memorandum of Understanding on facilitating exports of Russian food products and fertilizers, helped to reduce global food prices by over 23% from the record high reached in March last year. The Black Sea Initiative enabled the export of nearly 33 million metric tons of grain and foodstuffs and allowed the World Food Programme to transport 725,000 metric tons of wheat for humanitarian aid to countries including Afghanistan and Somalia. Under the Memorandum of Understanding, the United Nations delivered solutions on several of the most challenging areas of trade facilitation for Russian food and fertilizers, with continuous work on the remaining issues. We deeply regret that Russia ended its participation in the Black Sea Initiative in July of this year, and that immediately upon leaving, Russia launched a bombardment of Ukrainian ports and grain storage facilities on the Black Sea and the Danube River. Attacks against terminals and grain stores are unacceptable, and such assaults must end. Civilian shipping in the Black Sea has also been threatened. Further escalation could instantly shock the markets and destabilize the region. Volatility and uncertainty have already returned to international grain markets, while supplies from the harvest in Ukraine pile up. The bombardment is also undermining our efforts in the implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding with the Russian Federation. It has led many of those whose goodwill is needed, notably in the private sector, to question whether there is any real interest in returning to the Black Sea Initiative.
Hey, yo.
We
My
remain
camera's
engaged with
really
all
yellow
parties,
today, I don't know
aiming
why.
to ensure safe and secure exports of grain and fertilizer from Russia and Ukraine, and these must be put on a stable footing without the repeated threat
What is
of
this? Oh,
interruption.
secretary, okay.
I'm grateful to the government of Turkey for its contributions
I missed the
and
last
urge all member
few
states to support our efforts.
minute or something. I don't know,
Mr.
the bald
President,
dude was talking.
The United
The bald
Nations
dude was
continues
fighting
to
with
work
Albanian.
towards a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, in line with the
Why
Charter,
are you so yellow?
international law, and the resolutions of the General Assembly. I urge all countries to do their part to prevent further escalation and to lay the foundations for sustainable peace. We are fully committed to the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally
nothing.
recognized borders. This
Color
war is
key, what
already
is that?
causing
What
limitless
is that?
suffering. Its continuation risks further
Dismiss
perilous
Russia bad.
escalation.
That's
There
okay,
is
that's
never
okay,
an
that's okay.
alternative to dialogue, diplomacy, and a just
We're
peace.
living it.
Thank you.
Didn't show Russian's face. Ah,
I thank
saw
the
Albanian at the
Secretary
start.
General for this briefing.
the bald
And I
dude
now
was
give
like,
the floor to
why
His
Zelensky allowed to
Excellency, Mr.
speak
Volodymyr
here?
Zelensky, President
And the
of
Albanian
Ukraine.
goes, bitch, if you don't want Zelensky to speak here, maybe pull your troops out so we don't have to have this conversation.
Thank you.
And I was like, yeah, fine. That was
Distinguished
nice.
Prime Minister Rama, I'm grateful to the Albanian presidency for
Tries to switch my
the
yellow.
organization of
Doesn't
this
work.
meeting. Mr. Secretary General,
We're being kept in yellow today.
ladies and gentlemen, since the start of the full-scale aggression launched by the state, which for some reason is still present here among the permanent members of
Based.
the UN Security Council, has already been 574 days of pain, losses, and struggle. Russia has killed at least tens of thousands of our people and turned millions into refugees by destroying their homes. Most of the world recognizes the truth about this war. It is a criminal and unprovoked aggression by Russia against our nation, aimed at seizing Ukraine's territory and resources. But it's not just that. The terrorist state is willing, through its aggression, to undermine all the grounds of international norms meant to protect the world from the wars. And I'm grateful to all those who have recognized Russian aggression as the violation of the UN Charter. Ukraine exercises its right to self-defense, helping Ukraine with weapons in this exercise by imposing sanctions and exerting comprehensive pressure on the aggressor, as well as voting for relevant resolution, would mean helping to defend the UN Charter. The resolutions of the General Assembly have clearly recognized the fact that the only source of this war is Russia. But this has changed nothing for Russia in the United
That wasn't
Nations.
me.
However, these are the situations that have changed everything
The
for
whole
the UN.
glitch thing.
We
Thank
should
you.
recognize
I'm trying
that the
to
UN
do
finds
a thing
itself
with
in a
adding
deadlock on the matters of aggression.
one level of Croatian
Humankind
patriotism
no longer
for every
pins
sub.
its hopes on the UN when it comes to the defense of the sovereign borders of nations.
Okay.
World leaders are seeking new platforms and alliances that could reduce the disastrous scope of problems, the problems that are met here within these walls with rhetoric rather than real solutions, with aspirations to compromise with killers rather than to protect lives. Life should be defended uncompromisingly to ensure successful protection. But I would not be here today if Ukraine had no proposals precisely regarding some specific solutions. Yesterday, in my address to the UN General Assembly, I said that Ukrainian peace formula had become the basis
Okay.
to update the existing security architecture in the world, to restore the real power of the UN Charter and the rule-based international order. Now, I would like to present some very specific details based on the peace formula. Notably, it's point 5, and it's called Implementation of the UN Charter and the Restoration of Ukraine's Territorial Integrity and the World Order. All in the world can see what makes the UN incapable. Unfortunately, this seat in the Security Council, which Russia occupies illegally through backstage manipulations following the collapse of the Soviet Union, have been taken by liars whose job is to whitewash the aggression and the genocide being carried out by Russia. And all the UN actions, either by the Security Council or by the General Assembly, that could have stopped this aggression are shattered by the privilege granted to the aggressor with this seat.
Okay.
Veto power in the hands of the aggressor is what has pushed the UN into a deadlock. Today, no matter what nation you might be, a nation with hundreds of millions of people, or a small nation, a nation that bravely defends its independence, or a country whose long history of independence can help others, a state in need of help, or a nation that
Wait, opening.
provides some genuine support, a state relying on its army, or a state considering the UN Charter, but not the army as its first and last line of defense. Regardless of who you are,
Illegal.
the current UN
Illegal.
system still
Illegal.
makes you
You want us to get
less
top sent?
influential than the veto power possessed by a few and misused by one, Russia. That is to the detriment of all other UN members. These days in the General Assembly, we can hear the word inequality too often. Inequality is mentioned by different nations, both larger and smaller. It is precisely inequality that renders the UN ineffective. I regret that so far the UN Security Council is just the largest and the most visible platform in the world. I believe, and I know that UN is capable of more. I'm confident that the UN Charter can actually work for the sake of peace and security globally. However, for this
I tried to find
happen,
if they have like a
years-long
meme version of the
discussions and
flag with
projects on
Nazi stuff.
UN reform must be translated
Censored.
into a viable process of UN reform. And it should not be only about representation here in the Security Council. The use of veto power, that is what
Needs to
requires
make
the
one.
reform. And this could be a key reform. That is something that can restore the power of the UN Charter. Ladies and gentlemen, 574 days of the full-fledged Russian aggression means 574 reasons for changes in this chamber. And the numbers of votes in favor of this challenge actually amounts to billions. The absolute majority of people in the world want to live in the world free of aggression.
Legalize
In
nuclear
contrast
bombs.
to all us, there's only a few obsessed individuals.
As far as I've understood, he wants to
Veto
take
right
away.
should not serve those who are obsessed with hatred and war.
Okay.
What we observe in the United Nations is an increasing support for an idea that in cases of mass atrocities against human rights, veto power should be voluntarily suspended. But we can also observe that Russia will not give up this stolen privilege voluntarily. Therefore, the UN General Assembly should be given a real power to overcome the veto. This will be the first necessary step. If it is impossible to stop the war because all efforts are vetoed by the aggressor or those who condone the aggressor, it is necessary to bring this issue to the attention of the General Assembly. In the event of two-thirds of the votes reflecting the will of nations from Asia, Africa, Europe, both Americas, and the Pacific region, in other words, a global qualified majority, the veto should be effectively overcome, and such resolution of the General Assembly must be legally binding for all member states. The second step, The UN Security Council must be fully accountable to the nations of the world. I welcome the proposals of various leaders to expand the representation of nations in the Security Council. The composition of the permanent members of the Security Council should reflect the current realities, and
fixed the
justice.
flag.
Ukraine considers it unjust when billions of people
Oh,
do
the
not
voiceover
have
dude isn't
their
really good.
permanent representation in
Kinda
the
annoys
Security
me.
Council. The African unity must be here permanently. Asia deserves broader permanent representation. It cannot be considered normal when nations like Japan, India, or the Islamic world remains outside the permanent membership of the Security Council. One should take into account the changes that have taken place in Europe, notably that Germany has become one of the key global guarantors of peace and security. This is a fact. Therefore, it is also a matter of fact that Germany deserves a place among the permanent members of the Security Council.
I think
Latin
he's
America
coming from the
must be
position
represented
of
here permanently, and the Pacific states as well.
we shouldn't
However,
ask them. We should just
not
take it away.
confine all attention to those in top seats only. There is a need to expand the participation and access to the activities of the UN Security Council and its subsidiary bodies for all members of the UN General Assembly who are not recognized as aggressors. At the same time, any participation of the Security Council membership should be suspended for a period of time when such a state resorts to aggression against another nation in violation of the
I
UN
fixed
Charter.
it. Look
The
at
third
this.
step. There is a need for a system to prevent aggression through early response to
I
actions
censored
violating territorial
the bad parts,
integrity
and also
sovereignty
I
of
made the
states.
colors proper.
It is time
So
to do
now
that.
this is the
The
flag
nations of the
edited
world should agree on
in
such a
stream
mechanism
friendly.
for responding to aggressions to protect others that everyone would want for their own security. The Russian
fucking great.
invasion of Ukraine has shown
a Croatian
what
was here, they would
can
cry.
serve such a mechanism. Among other things, powerful sanctions against the aggressor.
PG-13,
Not only
yeah.
at a stage
Don't wanna be top
Bucha
cent, don't
has
wanna be
already
top cent.
happened, but also at the stage of the build-up of the invasion army. Anyone who wants to start a war should see before their fatal mistake what exactly they will lose when the war
I should do this
would
with all
start.
problematic
The
flags.
issue of applying such preventive sanctions should be automatically submitted for consideration of the UN Security Council when any member of the UN General Assembly reports a threat of aggression. Ukrainian soldiers now are doing at the expense of their blood what the UN Security Council should do by its voting. They're stopping
True,
aggression
Zelensky.
and upholding the principles of the UN Charter.
True.
And now talking about the territorial integrity.
can we just
this
point
is an
out
element of both the UN Charter and our peace formula that is inextricably linked
Impressive
to
it
the
is.
issue of cleaning
He's
the
calling
territory
them
from
out.
the occupiers. Occupation is an inexhaustible source of dynamite. under
I
the
did
international
color the
rule-based
squares.
order.
I did color the
So
squares.
I
Look
will
at it.
provide examples of concrete steps that to be taken for the security
colored them.
architecture
I
to be
switched them.
strong. Using Ukraine as an example. Very
I fixed all of it.
specific things, just like Ukrainians. First,
Censored every
complete
part.
withdrawal of all Russian troops and military
You're welcome.
formations, including
You're
the Russian
welcome.
Black Sea Fleet or its
You're now
latent
watching a
remnants, as well as
Twitch-friendly
the
stream,
withdrawal of all mercenaries,
which is not going to
and
get banned of several
paramilitary
platforms.
formations of Russia from the entire sovereign territory of Ukraine within our international recognized borders as of 1991.
Bitch, are we watching the war?
Full restoration of Ukraine's effective control over the entire state border and exclusive economic zone.
Man sees us laughing
including
at
the Black
Hos
and
flag
Azov
censored,
seas,
and
as
he's
well
like,
as in the Kerch
"What are you
Strait."
laughing?"
In fact, only the implementation
Why are you
of
laughing
these
at this?
2 points will result in an honest,
Why you laugh at the
reliable,
meme flag you
and
just made?
complete cessation of hostilities.
Do you not know
Ladies
there
and
are
gentlemen,
wars going on? Why are you
Reform
laughing?
of such international institutions were made following
North Korea, thank you.
tragedies,
Thank you. I
following
learned from the
major
best.
wars.
Tito.
We should not wait for the aggression to be over. We need to act now. Our aspiration
True.
for peace should drive the reform. As I was preparing the Ukrainian peace formula, I underpinned its points by the principles of the UN Charter. Only the principles of the UN Charter and resolutions adopted by the General Assembly. This is precisely what enables the Ukrainian peace formula to become global. The nations that engage with
Their
the
camera
formula
glitches every
realize
once in a
that they're
while.
working for the rule-based international order, for the protection of territorial integrity and sovereignty of states, protection of human rights, prevention of aggression, and genocidal policy. Naturally, The epicenter of such efforts should be in this very chamber, the UN Security Council chamber, and even to the greater extent in the General Assembly Hall. If reform of UN institutions is necessary for that, then we should not be afraid of such reform. We are ready to work together with UN members who have joined the peace formula to work on relevant draft resolutions and amendments to the UN Charter. And I would like to make it clear for everyone in the world that Ukraine
I think
is
that the funny
proposing
part
while
is that like they
addressing
chose to be in this war, you
nations
know?
of the world and calling
It like
them to
inherently
join
makes
the
it funny.
implementation of the peace formula.
You
Every
chose to be in
country
this war.
can demonstrate its leadership
It's
within
like you have a
the
moral
framework
right
of one
to
or
mock
more, or maybe all
USA
points of the peace
soldiers
formula.
who went to
We
invade
can
foreign
establish
countries.
groups based on the
Morally,
points of the peace formula,
it'd
where
be okay.
national security advisors
They chose to be there.
heads of states and diplomatic representatives work.
It's
Now,
different
these groups are tasked
when we
to
talk about
elaborate
nations that
a
didn't
list of
choose
decisions
to be
and
part of the war,
legislative
like
proposals
Ukraine,
to be
which got
implemented
invaded and
in
is
order
defending itself.
for the relevant point of the
But like
peace
bro,
formula
mocking
to be
decided
fulfilled.
chose
We're
to
ready
be there
hold,
and is
10
failing.
conferences at the level of advisors,
Mock them all you want.
and in accordance with the 10 points of the peace formula, then a summit on the level of leaders. Later, these drafts would be prepared and submitted for consideration by heads of states at the respective summit. Thereby, all nations of the world that respect peace can actively participate in restoration of peace. Cooperation is always the key word for Ukraine in international relations. This word is also key for peace. So let the peace prevail. May our institutions and our cooperation be stronger. I thank you for your attention, and thank you for the possibility to address you.
Zelensky.
Thank you for this invitation. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine.
Nice.
I thank His Excellency
I'm not a big fan
President
of the
Zelensky for his briefing, and I shall now
what's the word?
make a statement in my capacity as the Prime Minister of the Republic of Albania.
I don't like this.
Mr. Secretary
Big
General,
fan of him calling out Security Council.
Excellencies, Head of State and Governments,
Poland today nothing. Yesterday he
distinguished
had some claims.
representatives.
It
Thank
was
you all
actually
for
one
being
sentence.
here
What was
today.
it? That some
The
countries.
presence of such considerable number of dignitaries speaks
He speaks so
to the
loudly, I
very
can't
high
think.
importance.
But basically,
of
he
the
said
issue
that some
at
countries are supporting Ukraine only
Thank you,
in
Secretary General, for your
theory, but in
remarks.
practice,
They
in
resonate
some
with
resolutions,
reflect
they are
the
siding
values
with the
and
enemy.
principles of our
Hey,
organization.
no problem, Pablo.
President
We have the
Zelensky,
flag.
I'm grateful for your presence
No
here
problem, no problem.
at such a tragic moment in your country's
We added it
history.
anyways, no need to feel
Your
bad.
strong words translate the pain
I
of
had
your
fun editing
compatriots and convey very
What did I want to
clearly,
say? I forgot.
together with your firm determination,
Yeah, Poland.
the grit
Basically,
of your
Poland
people,
did comment on this,
and
and
the
if I remember
unwavering
correctly,
hope
Duda
of
commented.
your
No,
nation.
there's two sides. One side,
Excellencies,
Duda said that
while
currently
today the
Poland
world needs more than
is
ever
allowing
an
the
acute
transfer of
sense
twice
of
more Ukrainian
responsibility
grain than before, which means that they
from
are still
all of
strong
us
allies, still
to
strongly
confront the
cooperating
multiple
even better than
challenges and
before,
threats
which is a good
facing
thing.
our planet.
On the other hand,
Conflicts,
some other Polish officials
unconstitutional
have
seizures of
threatened they will
power,
pull support
climate
to
change,
Ukraine.
devastating floods and
So-
unforgiving droughts, including unpredictable
Yeah,
and
it's
severe
because of the grain markets.
wildfires.
Yeah.
What we witness
It's
instead
a
is more and more
very
disruptive
problematic
attitudes, reckless acts,
situation.
and growing
Very
conflictuality
problematic situation.
within and among
Obviously,
states.
the only side
In
benefiting
many
right now
parts of
is
the
Russia.
world, the examples of force
The
have
only side
proliferated,
benefiting currently is
while the
Russia.
force of
That's it.
example has become a rarity.
Personally, I think that it's
have
understandable why
imagined
Zelensky is angry.
Until not
I think
long
it's
ago,
understandable why
that in the
Ukrainians
third
feel
decade
disappointed
of the 21st
because they are
century, a disastrous
giving up
war
their lives
started by a permanent
to
member of
protect
this
Eastern
council
Europe.
would put Europe at risk by
Their
brutally
economy is
undermining
struggling because of
all the
this,
principles
because the battle
that
is
gave
happening on
birth
their
to the United
territory.
Nations. Who could have
I
imagined
understand why they feel
until only a
rather
few years
disappointed
ago
by the fact that
that an unjustified, unjust,
we are
unprovoked
choosing
military
to
aggression of a big country
lessen
against the new democracy
the amount
not
of
be
help we
immediately,
could give to their economy.
promptly,
I understand that.
universally
I also
condemned
think
by
it's
all the
understandable
nations
that elections in
together
Poland
here
are
and
incoming,
share the same goals
and at
and
the same
principles.
time, now Poles don't want to
How
make
to
their
understand the
farmers angry.
yes,
Thank you
but
so much for the cheers, Valo. By the way, thank you,
or
thank you, thank
calls
you.
on both sides with
Thank you very much.
arguments in order to avoid calling a spade a
So
spade,
I think it's understandable
and
why
which
both of them
refuse to
reacted
call
the way they
a
did.
brutal aggression
And I
by
do
its
hope that
only and real name,
we managed
man-made
to
tragedy
fix it.
that is inflicting untold suffering to the
I
Ukrainian
hope
people,
we managed
also
to solve
reverberating
this. I
across
think
world
it is
with
kinda being
hurting growth,
resolved
raising prices,
already.
threatening with hunger and starvation hundreds of millions of people. An
I don't know,
aggression in the
I'm
heart of
hoping
Europe
as well.
cannot be Europe's problem only.
Oh, I do think they are defending
as
Eastern
some
Europe.
think,
I do
as
think
some
that if
say,
Ukraine
or
falls,
as some whisper.
Baltics are the
Cynics
first
may
ones
think that
fucked.
Ukraine is just a problem dropped on the
I'm
lap
guessing
of
Moldova
democratic West
next.
to deal
I'm
with.
guessing Romania is going to be in
And
an
they
interesting
even
position
mumble
soon.
that what
Poland
goes
may be
around comes
later
around,
because Poland currently
implying that
is,
this is a natural
by
thing
itself, I almost want to
for
say a
what might
superpower.
have happened before.
I don't know what are the
elsewhere, in other
criteria,
times.
but when you look
Is
at
it?
Poland, I would say it's
Really?
leading its part of
I
Europe
invite
currently.
everyone to think twice. This
Oh, I
war
think
of
they will.
aggression must
I know
be
that there's
everyone's
the opinion
business.
that they wouldn't dare, and I
Let
know
me remind
Thompson,
us
for example, also
by
has that opinion.
paraphrasing
I
a
don't know
tragic
how much I
account
agree with
by
that.
Martin Niemöller. First they came for Georgia,
I don't know how
I
much
did
I'm
not see
agreeing with the
then they
idea
came for
that
Crimea. It was not my
Russia
country,
wouldn't attack
so I did not
Baltics.
speak out. Then they came for the whole Ukraine.
Ah,
It was
regional
not
powers
Ukraine.
makes sense, makes sense.
And I
No,
did
it
not
is a
speak
regional
out.
power, isn't it?
And then they came for me, but there was no one left to help and defend me. As we
Based.
speak, there have been
Based
more than
Albanian. We're turning into
26,000
Albanian nationalists right here.
civilians that have passed away.
Turning me into
Tomorrow
Kosovo
the number
supporter
will be
right
higher,
here.
and it will
Right
increase every
fucking
other
here.
day for as long as this war continues. Given the inexcusable nuclear
Oh yeah, it
saber
reaches the
rattling
point of like,
that keeps coming
are we
time and
aware
again
what is the price
from different
asked
layers
of
of the Kremlin. One
Poland
is right to fear that one day,
and
God
how
forbid,
we wage that
this
price,
madness
which is
to
why I
turn
think
into
it's
something
understandable that
far
Poland is not
worse.
willing to make farmers angry.
And don't forget,
But at the same time, it's
as
understandable that Ukraine is being like,
unimaginable as this war was yesterday.
you are aware that like
Excellencies, we have a duty to help those in
we're
need,
fighting
and in this respect, Ukraine
for
and Ukrainians.
the peace
We may
in
differ,
Europe.
Of course, we
Like
may
if Putin isn't stopped
on
here, he
how
will
to
continue.
support Ukraine
So
in its fight for freedom and
I am
dignity.
aware why
We
I've
may
seen
have different
Poles
views
bring up the
on
whole
how
thing
to
with
end
like,
this
oh, you know,
war.
we gave Ukraine
Let's
half our
discuss them.
tanks, and also
But
we
it would
welcomed
be an
millions of
insult
refugees. I
to
see
the
that
intelligence
part.
of this organization if we fail
Personally,
to
I also see
unanimously
Ukrainian part of like,
recognize and say
we're
loudly
shedding
who
blood
is
for
the
this.
aggressor and who is the aggressed. It is the same sharp difference.
It's not enough. I don't know
between
how we
war
could
and
determine
peace,
what's
as
enough.
Tolstoy
In my view,
would
nothing is
remind you.
enough.
Go
In
back
my
and
view,
read it.
what we all are doing is not enough
If
at
we
all.
fail to admit
I
this
think we're
crystal
not
clear
advocating
truth,
strongly
we
enough.
are
I
not
think we're
only
not
letting
sending
down
enough
Ukraine
supplies. I think
and
we're
its
not sending enough
we are
weapons.
failing our core
I think we're not
responsibility,
aware of how
compromising the
dangerous this
future,
is. I don't
and
think
betraying all
in the
our
face of
children,
a danger,
from
I don't think
Brazil
it's enough.
to Spain,
And I think it's okay to
from
acknowledge that.
the Arctic.
I think
to
we will
the
kind of got
southern
lulled
pole.
into this false sense
The
of
struggle of Ukraine is also the struggle of everyone who aspires to live in a world where
minimizing
nations
the
are
importance
free
of
and
this.
equal, where territorial integrity is undisputable and
Hmm.
the right to live in peace is unquestionable. The contrary is not only short-sighted.
Oh yeah, when it comes to responsibility, it
utterly
is again the
dangerous
question of
for
like
everyone
how
under
you
this
see
roof.
the threat of Russia.
This is why everyone
It is
has to
about
do
how
his part.
how much we see it as a threat.
Albania is a
Personally, I
small
do think it would be a huge
Our
threat if
continued
it
support to
manages to take
Ukraine
over
may not
Ukraine.
change the
I do think it
dynamics
would be a
of the
huge threat.
battleground.
I do think it would be a
But
huge threat to
it
both
contributes
NATO and
to
non-NATO
not
countries.
rewarding aggression
I don't
not
think that
accepting
Putin would
annexation,
reach the
and
borders
not
of NATO
letting
and then
the
stop.
obvious become
It's not really
dubious.
something I see the possibility of.
And again, I repeat, we may differ
I
on
don't
how
think he
to
would
deal
stop
with
at
this.
all.
We may have different
Why is
views
there
on
camera
how
glitching?
to go towards peace. But how
But yeah,
possibly
I do see it as
we
like
can have different views on Who
not
is the
just
aggressor
saving
and
Ukraine,
who
but
is the
also
aggressor?
saving ourselves. And I think in
Excellence,
that sort of
le devoir principal
world, I don't
Excellencies,
think
the
we're
main duty of the
doing
Security
close to
Council
enough, really.
is
Any
to
one of our
act
countries.
decisively on behalf of the entire world and in the service of the world. We can well understand those who are
But like,
many
as
in
far as I'm
number
seeing, they
who
are
ask, what is the Security
the
Council
relationship
doing?
between Ukraine
The
and
abusive
Poland
use of the
will
right
be
to
rebuilt.
veto,
So
sadly,
raiding
has
NATO is a
held
whole
the
other
Security
story.
Council
I don't
hostage.
think
It has
NATO would do much.
paralyzed the Council, but it
I
has not
genuinely
reduced it
don't
to
think NATO would
silence.
do much for
As
some of its
we can
countries.
see, the proof is
Like
here
the
in this
whole thing with
meeting.
Romania
The force
lying
of rules
about
and
not being
values
hit by
bring us
Russia,
together.
the whole thing with the
They
missile
should not be
in
replaced by
Poland,
rules of
which
force.
like we're still not seeing proper
And
investigation on.
With the rejection of values,
I'm
the
not
world
really
is dangerously tipping
buying into the
into
idea
what could
of
become a
NATO
tragedy
protecting
for all of
every
us.
inch.
calling the experience of the
Don't really
Western
know how I
Balkans.
see that. How I
We
see
have
that.
seen where the path of brutality can lead to, and the tremendous costs it brings for all, including for
It
the
would cease to
perpetrators.
exist. Yeah, I could
History
agree
has
with
confirmed
that.
those who saw
I
war
could agree with that.
as
I
a
do think
shortcut
NATO is
to
going
achieve
to
their
deal with a
goals
CSTO type of a test,
ended up
and
regretting
I
it
do
forever.
think this would be
Russia has tried many times
interesting
to use,
to look
or better,
into.
misuse
I think it would be
the
interesting to
changed
see how
reality
it
in the Western
acts.
Balkans, particularly the birth of the Republic of Kosovo, to justify their
Latvia's new MILF.
neo-imperial
Oh,
dreams
she, yeah,
and the
yeah.
subsequent nightmare they have exported
Though, to be honest, I'm
in
kind of
Ukraine.
simping for the
No
German
matter
one
how hard
currently.
one may try, Kosovo, whose independence has
Kosovo!
been sanctioned by the International Court of Justice, Chapter 14 of this Charter of United Nations, International Court of Justice, cannot serve
Kosovo!
as a pretext for territory grab or illegal annexations.
Thousands of Western
If today
soldiers.
lasting peace in our region is within reach,
I think
this has
for
to do
me,
first
it's
and
like, I
foremost
don't know
with
how
the
much
lesson learned
Westerners would want
in
to
the
get
most efficient
engaged
way
in this.
to overcome the past and
So I don't
overcome
know
the
how much
future
they would be willing to
is through
help.
cooperation, not through division. By
I
promoting
don't
free
know
movement
how
of
much we
people,
would be relying
goods,
on the help of
services,
allies,
capitals,
as Ukraine
not
is
by
relying on right
raising
now.
artificial barriers,
And
by
I don't
building
know how
bridges
much this
for our
help of
kids
allies would
to
be
enjoy freedom and prosperity, whatever their language, whatever their race,
politically motivated,
whatever their
like it is
nationality.
now.
Not erecting
I do
walls
understand it
for
would
our
give, for
ghosts of
example,
the past
USA would
to
have
seek
a
and
lot
hide in
more
endless
power,
blame
and
games.
USA would have a lot more
I'll end with
ability
this.
to send its
The
soldiers
preamble
there.
of the
And I
United
think I'm
Nations
kind of like
Charter
strongly relying
calls
on
on us
USA in
to
that sort of a
practice
situation.
tolerance and live together in peace with one another.
I don't know how
as
much I
good
want to rely on USA
Important decisions are never a matter of chance.
solely
They are
and
always a matter
only.
of choice. Albania has made its
Thank you, by
choice
the way.
to stand for peace, development and progress, to stand with the aggressor,
Think it's
not
secret?
with
I
the
don't know.
aggressors, to stand with
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Thank you.
What NATO is doing now could be considered as
I
following through
resume
with
now
Article
my
5.
function
Yeah,
as President of the Council.
there's no rules on what you
I
have
now
to
give the
do.
floor to His Excellency,
You just have to
Mr.
send
Guillermo
help
Lasso
somehow.
Mendoza,
There's no rules on how you
Constitutional
have to
President of the
help.
Republic of Ecuador.
They could be reacting in the same way we're seeing now. Like if a NATO country gets invaded, we could see the rest of NATO
Excellency
send them
Edi
barely
Rama,
enough
Prime
supplies to
Minister of the
survive for a
Republic of
while.
Albania and President of the Security Council.
Actual NATO army, no one has to send the army. It's not a rule. No one, no, it wouldn't be
I would
obliged
like
to
to
join.
thank
No.
for your
They would
conduct
be
of the
obliged
Security
to help.
Council during this month.
No one is obliged to send boots on the ground.
It has
They're
been
obliged to
almost
do
19
something.
months
They want to send food
since the
ratios,
beginning
they
of
can
the
send
war of
food ratios.
aggression against Ukraine.
They don't
The
actually
briefing
have to
provided
send
by
boots on the
Secretary
ground.
General Antonio Guterres continues to appeal to the Russian Federation to give peace an
I'm
opportunity.
playing shit.
continuar un día más.
Your APR already took a
This
massive
war
L.
cannot
Yeah, that's
go
true,
on
that's true,
yet
definitely.
another day.
Definitely a
The
big
Russian Federation must immediately suspend its
problem
military operations in accordance
that
with the order
definitely could have been dealt with a lot better.
The ruling of
It was
that court,
very, I
the
think, short-sighted
highest
the way that they dealt with it.
legal system
No, it did not.
in
NATO
the world
soldiers
on
come
the
from NATO
16th of March
countries.
2022.
As far as I know,
This
there's not like a
prolonged war
NATO,
was initially denied
NATO,
and was called a mere special
purely NATO.
military
So
operation
no.
in addition to
Yeah, NATO doesn't have
destroying
an army, right?
Ukraine,
No.
costing
It's
the lives
NATO
of thousands of
armies
people. It is undermining the very
are from
purposes
NATO
and
member
principles
countries.
enshrined in the United Nations
NATO doesn't
Charter,
have a military of its
in
own.
particular,
If
that
Article
of
5
territorial
is called
integrity.
for, NATO member countries have
At the
to
origin
respond.
of this organization, when this organization
But
was
as
built,
far as I'm
we, the
aware, they
peoples
don't.
of the United Nations,
The Article 5
determined to
technically
preserve
doesn't say
and
they have
spare
to respond
future
by sending
generations
boots on the
from
ground.
scourge of war,
It just says they have to respond.
and to that end, to practice tolerance and to coexist in peace as good neighbors.
Yeah.
On that basis,
Each,
the United
how does it
Nations
go?
Charter was built.
Each of them, in exercise of the right of the individual
Is
or collective
unique.
self-defense,
Ecuador has said
will
this
assist the party
before,
or
and we would
parties
insist
attacked
on
by
this point
taking
again today.
forthwith individually and
There
in
is not a
concert
charter
with
for
other
the
parties
South
such
and
action
another
as it
charter for the
deems what was
North,
it necessary or
nor
whatever.
is there a charter for
Basically,
the West
whatever you
and
think
one
is
charter for
helpful,
the
you
East.
do it.
In all
Again, you think
languages,
you
the
think, oh,
content of the
Poland's
charter
being
is the
invaded by
same.
Russia. What do we do? Do we want to send
It
soldiers
is
to die there?
one
No, we're going to
and
send them
indivisible.
food.
There is not one
You send them
version in
food.
Russian and a different version in Spanish.
You want to
In
send them
no case
uniforms? You send
is
them
the
uniforms.
use of force
You don't have
to
to
be
send boots
used
on the
against
ground.
the territorial integrity
It's
or
not
the
in the rule. You
political
don't have to send
independence
boots on the
of a
ground.
state, or
Now, I
to
do
be
think,
used in any
yeah,
way
yeah,
which runs
USA is a
counter
strong
to the
factor in
purposes
this.
of
The fact
United
USA, I
Nations.
believe, would strongly respond.
How can we uphold
And
the
also,
principles and purposes of the
some
UN
countries, I
Charter
believe, are more likely to be defended by others. Poland, for example, I
effective
believe, is going to be
multilateralism and
defended.
at the same time invade a neighboring
The
country,
Baltics, I'm
or
kind of
not
questioning,
condemn that
but I think
invasion,
Finland, for example, is a strong factor there.
maintaining indifference or complicity. On the contrary, to
USA doesn't
defend
have
the
to send
territorial
soldiers. Yeah, that's
integrity
true.
of states
If they pick the president
means
badly,
that
we
we
might be
must
dealing with a
respect
problem.
and implement the provisions of the UN Charter. We must maintain international peace and
The
security,
response force.
not to aggress a third state, and to abstain from voting in disputes where we're a party. There are those who say that the crisis of peace and security is due to supposed shortcomings in the Charter, but no reform, no new international framework will be sufficient for peace and security if states are not determined to respect and implement these higher principles. What a fatal blow for multilateralism to have a military invasion of a neighboring country. This war, which has
Yep,
impacted
Zelensky had a speech.
the dynamics and the work done in this Security Council, continues to undermine trust in the UN system. However, beyond the difficulties which this body is facing to have a clear-cut response to this issue, we must underscore the enormous contribution of the United Nations for millions of peoples and humanitarian groups working on the ground, providing emergency assistance.
Wait,
in
NATO
particular
response
to
force is
women
already
and
active in
children.
Ukraine.
I recognize the efforts of the Secretary General in the humanitarian sphere.
This is the first time they have been
including
activated for a military mission.
The Black Sea Grain Initiative, and we ask that that initiative be resumed. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, there are corrosive narratives which claim to justify this war, but there is no justification with any legal foundation. We have been told, for example, that the invasion of Ukraine is in response to a supposed group of countries of the West aiming to weaken Russia. We've been told that Russia is acting in self-defense in the face of anti-Russian policies with regard to some inhabitants or against Russian culture. But what greater act of xenophobia or disregard for one's neighbor than to carry out a war against one's neighbor? There's little truth in that position. We need only look at the pattern of voting in the General Assembly when resolutions have been adopted on the territorial integrity of Ukraine with a vast, clear majority. Of course, there is no veto which can halt the force of the General Assembly when it comes to defending the territorial
What I'm seeing
integrity
is
of
that
its
last year
members.
they
And
agreed
this
to raise the
majority
number
is not a
of
majority of alliances
high
or
readiness
partnerships, as
forces
some claim.
to over 300,000.
Ecuador rejects any
That was the last year's
invasion,
decision.
regardless of the country committing that invasion. Moreover, and in particular, if that country holds
And it came
a
along
permanent
investing
seat
more
in this
in
body.
NATO and
The
increasing
Secretary
common
General
funding.
Boutros Ghali affirmed that only a power can impose order on chaos. It is the power of principles which transcend changing perceptions of coexistence in the short term. Ladies and gentlemen, among the hundreds of thousands of people who have fled war, there were many Ecuadorians. Many of them had to flee through emergency operations with a support team out of Ukraine and into neighboring countries. These people were some of the first people impacted by the serious humanitarian fallout of this invasion, which continues to worsen. Millions of people are now
I can't
forced
try
to
anything.
leave their homes. They have been the hardest hit. Primarily
On the
women,
response
girls, and
force
boys are the ones who
in
are
case
hardest
of
hit.
Article
This
5.
war
Do we
has
have
continued
something
to
on
have
it?
a global impact as well. It has exacerbated the nuclear threat. It has led to global food insecurity, and it has impacted economies, in particular the economies of developing countries. For all of these reasons, we appeal to the members of the Security Council, individually and
wait.
collectively, to redouble our support so that the efforts and the good offices of the Secretary General can be played out on the humanitarian and political fronts so that we can work towards just peace based on territorial integrity and on the principles of the UN Charter immediately. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can't
Thank
find it.
you.
If someone has a source on it,
Thanks
let me
to
know.
His
I'm on the
Excellency Mr.
NATO
Laszlo
International
Borisov for
website
statement.
right now.
I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, President of the Republic of Ghana.
So far, because like it's very. Oh wait, found something.
On how we can uphold better the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter, with the unfortunate tragic events in Ukraine serving as a backdrop. I'm grateful to Secretary General Antonio Guterres
No, it's about them
for making
strengthening
a compelling case of the
the
shared
force.
benefits
That's
we
what I'm
derive
seeing.
as
They
member
strengthened
states
the force
when we
recently.
choose to be peace-loving, as required by the
Because
Charter.
what I've seen is that the council
President, none of us
decides
here in this chamber
on
claim not to be aware that our world is in a troubled
whether
place.
to send in the
The
response
sharp
force.
differences in geopolitical competition
And then when you look at
among
what the
major
response
powers
force is
and the
doing
intense convergence
and what it has
of the
been trained
crises in the world,
to do,
particularly of conflicts, climate change, inequality,
Where the fuck did I have that?
unconstitutional changes of government, and unsustainable development have undermined global trust and solidarity and unraveled the common logic that has prevailed since 1945, which is it is better to suffer the inadequacies of the multilateral system for the greater good.
Yeah,
than
there's
to
a bunch of
pursue the
components
chaos
of it.
the
I
unknown
assume all of them would
for
be
national
employed
advantage.
if the
In this
response force
context,
gets in.
and being mindful of the reality that neither geographic boundaries nor political ideologies
I'm not
have been
fing
able
it
to
about them having
isolate
to
any
join.
state
So we would be
from the
dealing
burden
with the
of the prevailing
council
crisis.
having to approve
Ghana
of it.
continues to hope in earnest for an end to the war against Ukraine and for the construction of a future
But I assume that will
marked
come
by
with
peaceful
determining the validity of
coexistence,
pushing for Article 5 in the
mutual
first place, right?
cooperation and brotherly relations between the two neighboring countries. Indeed, the Russian Federation's aggression against Ukraine is plainly wrong.
Okay,
We have said so on many platforms.
okay.
The war has had an increasingly devastating toll on the people of Ukraine and the rest of the world, particularly for those of us in Africa, and has challenged our shared values of international peace and security. The turnings of the war have constrained collective efforts in reinvigorating multilateralism and impeded common approaches to confront effectively several complex challenges of our time. For those of us in Ghana, however, the unfolding situation is not a lost cause. Whilst we are rightfully distressed by what is happening around us, we believe that together we can still mitigate the challenges of the unknown if we are
How?
prepared to cooperate for a peaceful, careful, managed process of the reform of global institutions that would redistribute fairly responsibilities and authority to reflect the present realities of our world. We also believe that history has a lesson to teach, and the painful lessons of the two previous world wars.
This beer today, which one
despite
is
the
it?
solemn commitments made by the
Which one
founders of
is
the
it?
United
Which one
Nations
is it?
to refrain from the
First
use of
beat.
force
He
and
goes, you sure it's
alienation
first?
among states. That common understanding to replace force and
Not getting attackums.
with the rule of
Hope
law,
Zelensky visits Biden and beats
cooperation,
his
and
ass.
the peaceful settlement of disputes underpins the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter and remains valid if we are to avoid a Hobbesian state of affairs in interstate relations. We must thus work together strongly to reverse the growing fragmentation of our world and the elevation of nationalist ideologies and actions above common
I'm fat and I need it.
violation of sovereignty,
What's your secret
territorial
ingredient?
integrity of states,
Do you add some
and
stuff in your
attempts to
spaghetti?
normalize such violations
I
as
have a friend who
selectively
adds mayonnaise
apply
into it.
the rules of
Like actual
international
mayonnaise.
law and the charter would only undermine
He
the
claims
promise
it makes
of
it
the past
taste
and the hope
stronger.
of the future
And I'm like,
generations.
does it?
It is in
But
this
also he
regard
adds mayonnaise to
Ghana continues to be a firm advocate
Omelette.
for dialogue and diplomacy in resolving the Russian
just like an
war
interesting idea.
against Ukraine.
I've just never thought of it.
We do not do so because
Chili
of
pepper.
a want,
Oh,
because of
smart,
want of
actually,
a
smart.
resolution of the dispute at any cost.
Oh wait, the
But
troops should be
united in our
deployed
belief with many others,
preemptively.
we believe
to
the
defend
only
certain
pathway for
locations.
comprehensive, peaceful,
Oh.
and sustainable resolution of the dispute is one that
Mayonnaise
must be
spaghetti, yeah.
just and based on the Charter of the
Squeezes out the
United
package.
Nations and
Saw him do it
international
once. I was
law.
like, "Where's that?
In taking a
What do you
principled
hold in that
position on the
mayonnaise
conflict
container?"
in
He's like, "It's
Ukraine,
mayonnaise." I'm like,
Ghana has been concerned about the ramifications
Why?
of the war. On
"Why
the
is it
global
going in your
community
food
and
like that
multilateralism.
during the cooking process?"
We therefore welcome the opportunity that the new agenda for peace provides. Which is
I don't
to
even know if it
reset
adds
our
anything
common
to the taste. To be
understanding
honest, I
of
tried
how
it and it was
among
like the same.
others
Yeah,
we
my
relate with each other as states.
one of the first thoughts I had was like, but I thought I thought it's alcohol. I thought it's some sort of alcohol. I don't have friends who would put their cum in food, slippers. That's a unique experience of yours. But I thought it was alcohol because my father puts alcohol in food. Like he was making
many of the
what's
organs
the word?
and institutions established by the Charter, such as for the Security Council,
Chobanac.
continue to be
Yeah,
relevant.
and you put a bunch of meat and you
The
cook it.
Council's composition
And he
working
put
methods
alcohol in
need
it, and I was like,
renewal through the completion of the
but
long
it's for the meat to
outstanding
cook
reforms.
better, apparently.
The support of
I'm
the
not a
Common
communist.
African Position on
I'm not a
Security
communist. I
Council
actually hate communists.
reforms contained in the
I've got very
Azawini
strong feelings
Consensus
towards communists, and all of my
gather
feelings are
urges of
negative.
transformation
I just like talking about Tito. Not in an overly idealistic way,
Security Council
more in
that
a
is
way of
representative, and which
interesting
also
little man.
addresses the historical injustice
Putting alcohol in
done
meat
the
while cooking is a pro
continent of
move. I've never done that.
To overcome
I have
knotty
never done
discussions
that.
around the veto,
As in, he was
we
cooking
encourage
something.
the
He was here
ongoing efforts
for
to
his
limit its
vacation,
use
and he
and
was
the
cooking
subsequent
meat.
placement of a
And he goes,
moratorium
bring
on
me
its
the
use
cognac.
that will lead progressively
And I was like,
to its removal
you gonna be
over a
drinking
reasonable
while
period of
cooking?
time.
Nice.
Cannot
Because like
continue to
sometimes
have
I
a
get cold
Security
beer from the
Council
fridge while I'm cooking
that
and
is
also drink it, you
structurally
know.
limited from
So I
being
was like,
effective
nice.
and
So I
yet
go and I
allows
bring him some
universal
cognac, and he just
acceptance for its decision.
puts it into the
As well as many other
into
things in
food, and I
life,
was like,
with changes, we need to adapt.
we could have drunk
And with
that.
authority comes a responsibility
But yeah,
that must be
it's
kept.
because the chicken was really
Second,
old, and it
The
took
peace
a
of the
while to
world is
cook.
indivisible
So you put in
and
some
integrated
alcohol
with
to
all other global arrangements beyond
speed
our
up the
collective
process.
security. Our efforts of preventive
Why do
diplomacy
they always look so
must
poor?
be comprehensive
It's
and broad-based. We need to be aware that,
it's
for
it
instance,
technically though
inimical
technically
economic
it's
and
kind of
financial policies have an
almost
enduring
fair.
impact on peace. And that global policies and
You know, like if
structure
you've
and
seen
function of
the way
international
people have lived during
institutions
communism,
cannot remove
it's
the
fair. At
centrality
least they're
of peace
cosplaying actual
from their
communists.
raison d'être. We must
Let's
strengthen
properly
in a
imagine being a
comprehensive
communist and then looking
integrated
rich,
manner
like
our
Hassan type
efforts
of
in
a person.
preventing the outbreak of violence or resurgence of new conflicts.
Then this meat and that's flavor. Yeah, I've
Thirdly and
never
finally,
tried it. And let's try it
multilateralism
while
at the global level must be accompanied
bacon,
by effective
roasting
regional
meat. I did try it in that sort of a
partnerships that
way,
help to anticipate better
like when you put
threats
it in
to
a
our
pan.
common humanity,
But I've never tried it while
which
cooking, like
prioritize
actually cooking.
specific means for resolving differences, and which cuts across
I know I'm a
regions.
commie, but please stop. I'm
enhance
tired
its
of eating white
effectiveness
rice. You
when
remember that one dude on Twitter
When we fail to
who's an
alleviate fully the potential of
anarcho-communist or
regional
something,
bodies, we can only have
and he
ourselves to blame
refuses to be a
when
part of the
multilateral
system.
efforts at the global
But
level
then he needed
are
to
unable
ask
to
help
deliver.
from his Twitter followers
In
because
ending,
I think someone in
call
his
again
family
for
got
peace
sick or
in
whatever.
Ukraine and emphasize
And he
as
was
my
like, yeah, guys, well,
delegations
the
often
situation
done
is
in
really
this
hard,
Council,
and it's really hard for
that
me to
there's no
maintain my lifestyle.
alternative to winning the peace in Ukraine.
Because, like, I still want to stay
Though
true
the
to my
Council can
ideology,
help its
but
United
also I
Nations
really
proceed
need money now,
with
so can you
enhanced
donate to
role
me?
in support of peace efforts around the world,
But
but in particular in Ukraine, for the benefit of all peoples. Mr. President, I thank you for your indulgence.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Akufo-Addo for his statement. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Alain Berset, President of the Swiss Federation.
oh, the Swiss.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Oui.
Thank you, first and foremost, for organizing this debate, and I also wish to take this opportunity to thank the Secretary
Here you
General
go,
of the
Commie.
United Nations for
Stay
his remarks.
useless.
But beyond his remarks, I wish to thank him for his steadfast, unstinting commitment to the advancement of peace, the advancement of dialogue, and
Allows the nations of
especially
job
when
applications.
it is most difficult.
Print out job
Excellencies,
applications
ladies
like
and
around
gentlemen,
him.
first of all, the facts, and they are not positive. The times we live in are marked by the questioning of multilateralism, the multiplication of conflicts, and the deepening of inequalities. And there's a question, where's our responsibility? Where does our responsibility, our shared responsibility lie? Our
Cute, the Swiss is
responsibility,
asking.
we who have convened here At the very minimum, that is to
Our
recall
responsibility
the
is to
essential
take the Nazi
principles
gold
enshrined in the Charter of the
and
United
get rid of
Nations.
it. Oh no, wait,
Copy
this is not
here,
World War
of
II anymore.
course, and to fulfill
Our
the
responsibility
mandate
is to
which
take
has
the
been
Vatnik
entrusted
gold
to us.
and then
This
get rid of
core
it.
text expresses our desire, our shared desire, the shared desire of all peoples to live in peace. And this
He's
text is a
doing
guarantor of
he's annoying
universal
me.
values, the overarching principles of the multilateral order, sovereign equality of states,
Go into
and
specifics.
a
Go into
prohibition
specifics.
on the use of force, defense of human rights, including economic, social progress for people. And in this war, as we know, during war, the suffering of civilians is a common denominator.
I can't. Let me go click on some linkies. There's he's doing the pageant queen thing. I can't listen to it. You guys know in all wars people are suffering. In all wars, guys, people are suffering. Wars are bad. Wars are very, very, very bad. This is why we will not do anything, because wars are bad, and we are going to be looking at it from the outside. Fiery morning in Moscow. Ooh. Unknown patriots liquidated AN-148 Il-20 airplanes. One night hunter helicopter belonging to the 354th Special Forces Aviation Regiment. Helicopter will not be back in service for a long time. Its tail section was damaged. Airplanes are in such a state that it's cheaper to write them off than to restore them. Nice! Estimated cost of the damage to Putin's security forces is more than $70 million. This is where government planes are based, the so-called doomsday planes. Air command centers in case of, for example, a nuclear war. And special planes, reconnaissance planes. Whoa. Okay. Thank you, unknown patriots. Thank you. Country that lost a battle so badly they became neutral for several centuries. It's easy to be neutral when you're like that, though. It's easy to be neutral in their geographic position, isn't it? Not that easy to be neutral in any other place, really. But ayo. I see this. I did have a conversation on this. We don't have titles. But he's still GG. He's still GG, okay? We're still being friendly. We're still being good with each other. Let's not get too dramatic. SU-34. I actually saw the news about it. Did I save it? Who the fuck knows? I saved this. This is a big piece of news. Ahaha. But yeah, apparently the pilots have managed to eject. So there were no casualties, apart from the plane being destroyed. The plane's gone. Hey, yeah, Magnus, by the way, how's life going? We were watching the UN Security Council thing.
These are resolutions that are geared towards promoting peace and security.
Currently,
in Colombia,
they are
in
letting the
Afghanistan,
Swiss
in
speak.
Iraq, and in South Sudan. And these examples are really there to show us that the Security Council, even though it is more difficult than in the past, has retained its capacity for action. Of course, there's an urgent need for reform, and Switzerland has been committed for a number of years to greater and better representation, beginning with the African countries, committed also to better working methods. And yet we are all aware of the fact that no reform can replace the will of states to respect the Charter. In the new agenda for peace, the Secretary General has indicated further steps forward to step up our action in multilateralism, to strengthen to close ranks around the principles of universality, of solidarity, and trust. And we have been assuming this duty of solidarity. In Ukraine, we are committed to alleviating the suffering of the civilian population, rendering justice to the victims, promoting a political solution to the conflict in due time. We have opened our doors
makes
to
sense.
people
Yeah.
fleeing the war. We have been delivering humanitarian aid. We have been
It is very much what it
collaborating
sounds
with
like,
the
isn't it?
Ukrainian government on the process of reconstruction. And the challenges, the tasks facing Ukraine are immense. To give just one example, an area four times the size of Switzerland. Switzerland is not a large country. 4 times the size of Switzerland. That is the territory of Ukraine, which has been contaminated with mines. And there, too, we have been supporting humanitarian demining with our know-how and with deliveries of equipment and a commitment that we will continue to shore up. And it is in the same spirit of solidarity that we are calling for the relaunching of the Black Sea Initiative. We wish to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to the Secretary General for his tireless efforts in this regard. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, multilateralism is the only option. The only option to achieve peace, the only way to move away from individualistic thinking in which each side seeks only to defend their own interests, to maximize their own influence, the only option to relaunch the search for common sustainable solutions that guarantee a dignified life for all. And against this backdrop, in this spirit, Switzerland welcomes diplomatic initiatives in favor of a lasting peace in Ukraine, a peace rooted in the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, the Charter which is truly the cornerstone of peaceful coexistence of all states. In the past and today, threats, isolationism, violence, have never provided answers to the dysfunctions and imbalances of the world in which we live. And this Council, Security Council, can only successfully fulfill its mandate.
I'm pretty
Therefore,
sure fucking Nazis in the ass was
ensure the common
proven
desirable
to be
people
quite
of this world
useful.
to live in peace and security to be made a reality. Only can it achieve this if it acts in a spirit of trust and collaboration.
Like, I don't really see this whole thing with like, all wars have to be ended through diplomatic means.
Everyone around this table. Today we have an opportunity to reverse course, to change the situation. We have this opportunity, but there's a need for will to be there, for ardent will to be there, because a lasting peace is worth more than any fleeting gain. Thank you.
Mr. Berset for his statement. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Fumio Kishida, Prime Minister of Japan.
Yes, aviation did one mishap, everyone loses their minds. Russia did countless mishap, no one cares. Yeah, we kind of, I think it's one of those, you know, like how we refuse to demand Russia to pull out.
The leadership of
even the peace
Albanian Prime Minister
seekers,
Rama, for convening
they will constantly talk about how they want Ukraine to stop fighting, but never once do they talk to Russia that they should stop the fucking invasion. And I think it's because I think we did Russophobia so well so far that they don't even see them as a side worth talking to. That's my theory on this. It's like that's why you're calling for Ukraine to stop fighting and you're not calling for Russia to stop attacking. It's because you know they're primitive little losers. You know they will not stop.
Of international peace and security.
In the same way, I don't think that we see Russian failures as that worth commenting on, because we see them inherently as like a nation prone to failures of that size. So it's more shocking when USA has a failure like that, but when Russia has it, it's like expected. It's Russia in the first place, you know? What's shocking then? Nothing. What's gonna be the newspaper titles? Russia does a stupid thing because they are stupid and corrupt.
I renew my determination
No one's gonna be surprised.
Japan stands with Ukraine.
Now only people clicking because they are the ones surprised.
Russia's aggression against Ukraine, which is a clear violation of international law, including the UN Charter. The aggression must be stopped immediately, and the troops must be withdrawn right now and unconditionally. Any attempt to unilaterally change the peacefully established status of territories by force or coercion must not be tolerated anywhere in the world. Irresponsible nuclear rhetoric, the deployment of nuclear weapons in Belarus, and the occupation and militarization of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant pose a threat to world peace and stability. Russia's nuclear threats, let alone its use of nuclear weapons, are unacceptable. Abuse of the veto power to obstruct the decisions of the Security Council and undermine its credibility cannot be accepted by the international community. Mr. President, Russia's aggression against Ukraine has
to jump on US. Okay, yeah, that's two.
rule of lawlessness around the world.
USA does the smallest mistake, and everyone's like, these fuckers.
Or third Ukraine.
They are very rich. They are very strong, though.
To achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace
Thank you, Morans, who are saying Wagner is 100 kilometers from Kyiv right now. This is secret plan to destroy Ukraine. Yeah, after the coup happened. I remember that. I remember being here in this stream, and I remember telling to you people that that is a stupid theory. And if you see anyone pushing that theory around, you have to know they are a stupid person. And I remember one of the regulars in chat, I don't remember who it was, I remember they were like, what's your evidence for it being a stupid theory? Because they actually are closed right now. And that was the first time in this chat I was like, bro, are we being infiltrated?
Following these discussions,
how in the world? Who the fuck would fall for it? It was such a stupid thing to claim.
Japan welcomes
oh yeah, hey, Wagner needed to launch a full pretend coup to land in Belarus.
And will continue to make a positive contribution. Mr. President.
Yeah, Japan has been based for a while. Japan has been very based on this.
Ukraine has caused serious problems such as refugees, food and energy insecurity, and threats to nuclear safety, and has led to suffering for many people around the world. Japan is committed to working together
and for this reason, we ask Russia
to promote efforts to support the afflicted people. Japan strives to promote human-centered international cooperation, overcoming differences in regimes and values in order to protect human dignity. Mr. President, there has never been a time when effective multilateralism, the theme of today's debate, is more needed than now. We must overcome numerous calamities, including the aggression against Ukraine, and realize multilateralism rooted in a spirit of solidarity. Bearing this in mind, I myself have engaged in a series of discussions with leaders of various countries.
Wait, what
Japan
we were talking about
when? Organized a Security Council open debate on the rule of law and peace building during our Council presidency to listen to the diverse voices of the international community. Japan will further strengthen its efforts to resolve issues concerning international peace and security.
I'm not necessarily crazy, just it reminded me of that one conversation we had in chat with that one dude pushing for I talk on Russian nuclear submarines, you know.
Now
like sometimes,
is the time to return to the unshakable principles
sometimes
that
I get surprised
have built up since
by
1945, including
which
the United Nations Charter,
theories
and work
take ground even in communities which support Ukraine.
To this end, strengthening
sometimes it's surprising, you know, like with the whole thing with Wagner being very close to Kyiv. It's like
in both its permanent and
how
seats
you know how does a person fall for that?
World, including
genuinely,
Africa.
how?
We must now take concrete
it's not really
action
something that's even a.
And the 80th anniversary of the
it's not a valid fear, but it's also just in no way is it a proper theory. How do you fall for that? I understand pro-Russian side falling for it because they want to support Russia. So they, you know, will repeat pro-Russian propaganda.
Human dignity. Thank you for your attention.
I thank His
But like
Excellency Mr. Kishida
pro-Ukrainians falling for it?
statement,
Oh no.
and I now
It's
give the
a
floor
weird thing.
to His Excellency Mr.
Or like the whole thing with
Robert
like, oh
Vella,
yeah, I
Prime Minister
fear
of
the
Republic of
possibility
Malta.
of Russia sending nuclear submarines and wiping out several American cities at once.
Excellencies and also dear friends.
How do you fall for that?
First of all, I would like to kick off by thanking
If you
the
were
Albanian
pro-Russian,
presidency
I
for
understand
having
you would
organized
repeat it without
this
falling for
high-level
it,
open
but you would
debate
repeat it.
of the Security Council. I
But if
also
you're
thank
not,
the Secretary General for
why
sharing
do you fall
his
for that?
thoughts with us earlier today. 12 years ago, soon
Understanding
after
of how linear
the
timeline
outbreak
works.
of the Arab Spring, Malta had launched its bid to serve
They
on the
cannot look at
Security
history
Council.
literally
That was a
of
time
2
I
years
remember
ago
of
and draw conclusions.
turmoil,
They're absolutely
also
fucking the
instability
brain.
in our immediate neighborhood, but also it was
There
a
was an
time
attack on Kiev
of hope
already in the
and
moment when Ukraine
aspirations.
was in the most vulnerable
The
and it
decision to
failed.
embark on this journey stemmed
No, it's so stupid.
from
The
our
idea that they would go
commitment
to
to
Belarus all the way to attack
principles
Kiev, from
enshrined
which
in
they
the
were
United
already kicked
Nations
out.
Charter.
But also
We
the
are
idea they
timeless and
needed
also
to, stage a
universal
whole fucking coup
and an
to go
integral
to
part
Belarus when they could have
of
just
our
walked
foreign
in
policy.
and Lukashenko would be
Our
absolutely okay with
unwavering
that.
belief is that
It's such a
multilateralism, today's
stupid theory
major
overall,
theme
such a
that we are
stupid,
discussing,
stupid
holds the
theory
answer
to
to
follow.
contemporary challenges, and that all
Hey,
countries
Nicholas.
should engage
Russian
proactively
Baldy. I don't know where
to
he
this
is.
end, and this served as our point of
Oh, I wasn't
departure way
listening
back.
to the Malta dude.
Today, as elected members of this council, these convictions continue to serve as our guiding light. Mr. President, more than ever, the world today needs an effective multilateral system with the United Nations at its core. We must redouble our efforts to uphold and also defend the fundamental principles that unite us. We must promote our common values at a time when they are being aggressively undermined and threatened. We must protect them and adequately respond to any contempt for these values. At the same time, we must not
What does
lose
that
sight
mean?
of the fact that we are living in a world where conflicts, unfortunately, are on the rise. The nuclear threat still looms. The climate crisis
Who is threatening?
unfortunately, spiraling out of control. Democracy and human rights are
He goes,
under a
the
systematic
nuclear
attack.
threat is
Global
still here,
inequalities
as if
are
it's like a
deepening.
natural concept.
Disinformation
that just
and
happened.
misinformation campaigns are feeding as well as amplifying tensions. No country by itself can tackle these complex and existential challenges. They require our
Everyone
full
complained there's no
and
women talking in
collective
the UN?
attention.
Oh.
Effective multilateralism is the only avenue to address
Damn.
these challenges in a decisive and holistic manner.
They got
Mr.
a
President,
horse representation, but they
if
don't
we
allow
are
women to
to
speak.
reach these ambitious goals,
You know, photo
we
session?
cannot resign ourselves to living in a world where
Who?
might is right. Last year,
damn.
the Russian Federation began its aggression
Who are
against
these
Ukraine,
two?
violating its
Is that his
sovereignty
wife?
and also
Who's
its
that one, then?
territorial integrity.
No, that's his wife?
These
That's
acts
his daughter?
constitute a blatant violation of the United
His
Nations
mother
Charter
and his wife.
also a violation of international law. They were overwhelmingly deplored and rejected by the General Assembly, who had called for Russia's immediate
Good luck,
withdrawal
Ruskies.
of its military
May
forces
we see you people
and
do lots more
cessation
photo shoots,
of
I guess.
hostilities. This war profoundly
His mother and
undermines
their
the
daughter.
multilateral system. It weakens and also destabilizes this very council. The immediate and long-term consequences of such actions by a
Emblem of the
permanent
response
member of
force.
this council cannot be emphasized enough. And on the occasion of this debate, I reiterate Malta's full support for Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity within
like it's going to
its
load.
internationally recognized borders. I equally underline Ukraine's inherent right to self-defense as enshrined in Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. Ukrainian people have paid the heaviest price as a result of this unjustified and unprovoked war of
this works.
aggression. It has led to another human-made catastrophe as the world was still struggling to find the path to normality following a crippling COVID pandemic. All wars are indeed devastating, and this is, of course, no exception. Lost lives are gone forever and will never be recovered. The scars
Yeah,
of
why
those
did this
wounded,
war start?
injured and
You coward.
traumatized by conflict never fully heal. Once
Ukraine
the
is one
fighting
big
is over,
coward.
the road to recovery will still be a long and arduous one. Through its actions, Russia did not only bring war back to Europe's shores, it also generated a global food crisis that has seriously
Now that you
impacted most
mentioned
developing
it.
countries around the world.
We need an
And
American
while
writing
the
of
Black
this
Sea Grain Initiative allowed almost 33
Okay.
million people,
What do you
33
think of
million
Kyle
tons of grain
Rittenhouse?
to be
Oh,
shipped,
you support him
Russia's unilateral decision to
carrying
pull
a
out
gun
of the
around
deal has seen grain prices
and
unfortunately
shooting at
soar
people
up.
out of
Again, I once
self-defense?
again state Malta's here uncompromising
Curious.
position that using hunger and food supplies as weapons of war is completely
Oh yeah, the flag thing
unacceptable.
is
In closing, Mr.
amazing. The
President,
flag thing is great.
I
It's Flag
reiterate
Waver, by
and
the way. I don't
emphasize
know if
once
you know the
again
website.
that there can be no peace in our future if the strong can trample on the weak. There can be no peace if international law can be brushed aside.
It's this one.
If geopolitical interests so demand. There can be no peace if the rights of states and individuals can be suspended or revoked at any time. Malta's commitment to peace, dialogue, and multilateralism remain as strong as ever. We remain firm in our resolve to stay at the forefront of the defense
We should have a dialogue,
of the
guys.
United Nations
Let
Charter.
Russia
No matter
sign
how
another
difficult
deal, it's going to
or
break in some time
disheartening
anyways.
circumstances may
Ceasefire.
seem,
I saw this.
we must never give up on
Saw
peace.
this.
We must never give up
Yeah,
on
apparently
dialogue,
Azerbaijan
and
just
we simply
now
cannot
has full
afford
control over the
to
area,
do
and
so.
that's it.
In this time of upheaval,
that seems
our
to be it.
collective reply is
Wait,
to
did I-
redouble and redouble and
click on
redouble
this?
our efforts
I did.
and
Okay,
continue
nice.
to invest in our multilateral system. In doing so, we must also
we?
reform this council to make sure it is
No,
truly fit for
yes.
purpose
Yes.
in today's world. A council
Yeah.
that is more transparent,
Apparently.
more
I
effective,
think
more
in
representative, more accountable,
In the
and also
afternoon,
more
they were supposed
democratic.
to do the
Meanwhile,
ceasefire.
we remain
Now-
convinced that the only step towards
Yeah.
a lasting peace in Ukraine
There's been a
is
lot of
for
genocidal
Russia to immediately cease all
shit
hostilities.
spread out by the
It
Azeri
must
side,
unconditionally
so-
withdraw all its forces and also its military equipment from the entire territory of Ukraine within its internationally
Let's hope.
recognized borders. Thank you.
Let's hope.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Abella for his statement. Et je donne maintenant la parole à
I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Raymond Dongsima, Prime Minister of Gabon.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, I thank the UN Secretary-General for his enlightening briefing on the terrible conditions and the fallout of the war in Ukraine 19 months after the outbreak of war. Since the beginning of hostilities in Ukraine, my country has expressed its opposition to the war and condemned the violation
Telegram
of
is saying,
Ukraine's territorial
due to shortage of
integrity.
loaves, the price
We
is
have
going up and they
unequivocally
can't find
reaffirmed the
them to
principles
crowdfund.
of the UN Charter
They are
as
running
the
out of
underpinning
Scooby-Doo
of our
vans.
coexistence. Above all,
Buy a
Gabon
person's
has
Scooby-Doo van
tirelessly
right now
called
to
for an
fuck up
immediate
Russians.
ceasefire and for
We should all have
negotiations
5 of them in our
good faith
garage
between
immediately
the
and then send
parties
them to
be taken
Ukraine.
up in order to silence the weapons. 570
I
days
don't
since
know.
the beginning of this deadly
I
war,
think what
the shockwave has continued to spread beyond the
Azerbaijan is
borders of
doing
Ukraine.
with the attempts of ethnic
Millions of
cleansing
people
is
have been
absolutely
forced to flee
inexcusable.
within
Starving out the
Ukraine,
civilian
and
population
millions
also
more are
absolutely
now
fucking
refugees
inexcusable.
beyond national borders.
So you know, of course, it's very
Deaths are counted in the thousands.
concerning
While indiscriminate
to see
shelling
the situation
continues to
happen.
target
Armenia
essential
has been abandoned by Russia, which was its ally,
structures,
supposed ally, not really.
sparing
So then also I'm
nuclear power
very,
plants, bridges, hydroelectric dams, schools,
I'm
and
very
hospitals
worried
in the
about
path.
what will happen now.
And the nuclear threat has become
because realistically,
more
people haven't
widespread.
taken the
The
Azeri
international
threat
system, in
seriously
particular the
at all.
agricultural sector,
And
as
then,
well as many
you know,
value
The
chains,
war, is it
continue
a
to
war? Yeah,
suffer
technically. It
from the
started,
fallout of
and
this
suddenly everyone
conflict.
remembered that Azerbaijan
This
used to
has
be a threat.
worsened the global humanitarian
And now it
toll
seems
by
like they're going to
sowing
forget
hunger,
about it again. And I wonder
precariousness,
if there are reports
despair,
of ethnic cleansing in
and
the
fear, but also
area happening. I wonder if
invisible
anyone's going to
wounds
take them
such as
seriously.
hatred and the rejection of others. As we assess
You
this
know what I mean?
situation, it is not clear whether or not the trauma suffered by children, women, and men exposed to the horrors of war will be reflected in the final tally of this conflict. On this point, we wonder how much horror must be suffered before de-escalation is finally considered. How much terror must be sown before the warring parties agree to sit down to talk. Mr. President, since the outset of hostilities, every rostrum in the United Nations has been the stage for accusations and for opposition. They have not provided relief or remedy for those who have fallen in the trenches or who have been crushed under the debris in the battlefields and in the cities and villages of Ukraine. An alternative to war is possible, and it must be found in existing channels outlined in the UN Charter and in relevant resolutions of this Council. Without delay, we must reconcile with the spirit of the UN Charter. Its beating heart is our common determination to spare present and future generations from the scourge of war. My country reiterates its appeal to the parties to negotiate in good faith in order to put an end to this war. We call on the parties to show restraint and responsibility. Everything must be done to ensure de-escalation and to create conditions which will allow
Man,
for
it's like they're
diplomacy.
intentionally choosing to be stupid. There's no way this dude doesn't know
that
about Minsk.
Any unilateral action which further deadlocks the situation,
no
hardens positions, and
fucking
fuels
way he
antagonisms
doesn't know about
must be
Minsk
ruled
deals.
out. I reiterate my
Is he
country's
just
opposition
choosing
to
to
war.
ignore him?
Opposition to the war in Ukraine, but opposition to any war in the world, in particular the many chronic and cyclical
It
wars
has
in
to be
Africa.
malice. I feel it has to be
Rejecting
malice.
the mindset of war is not fleeing war, nor
Like at this
nor
point,
is
to
it
be
a
calling for
sign of
negotiations as if
cowardice
you're unaware
or
Russia
an
broke
opportunist
every
stance.
deal it signed.
We must
There has
draw
to be a
from
choice.
the indelible lessons of the history of unjust wars, which have been hammered home, that the fact that those who cause, provoke, or maintain these wars are rarely the winners. Beyond the criminal responsibility which can be established, the tribunal of history will be uncompromising, and that is why we reject this mindset of war. We must uphold the noble ideals of the United Nations. My country has a long-standing tradition of peace which has never let us down, even when we had to take existential choices about our future. We've always been able to opt for peace, and we continue to defend this ideal, which we believe is an imperative, because the war runs counter to the values which underpin this organization and the Security Council. Every day of war
Now they
brings
would
into
probably
question
give
our
better
calling,
opinions.
our mandate, and our credibility. In conclusion, I would like to work together with the parties to help restore peace in Ukraine, because we stand for peace in Ukraine. We support the process of peace and dialogue and every initiative which aims to activate the channels of diplomacy and to silence the weapons in Ukraine is a good thing. We support the initiatives for peaceful coexistence between Russia and Ukraine. Thank you.
Je remercie son
I thank His Excellency Mr. Ndong Sima for his statement.
To His Excellency the Right Honourable Oliver Dowden, Member of Parliament, Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Thank you, President. I am proud to sit here today in solidarity with President Zelensky.
Thank you.
He
Holy shit,
and the
thank you.
Ukrainian people have met Russia's invasion of their country with bravery and with courage.
Thank you. Naming
I
the
pay
invader,
tribute
thank you.
to their fortitude.
Thank you.
Ukraine's fight against Russian aggression is not
Can't
only
believe
a fight
I'm
for freedom, it is also
like in the
a
fucking
fight for the
Brit.
principles upon which the United Nations itself is based. Principles underpinned by our Charter, which says that all state sovereignty is equal, that territorial integrity is inviolable, that disputes should be settled
Yeah, the Queen's in
peacefully,
heaven, that's why she's closer
and
to
that
God.
we
He can
must
actually be saving
protect
her.
those things
Thank you, God.
together.
Keep her safe.
When Russia's tanks rolled into Ukraine, they trampled over every single one of those principles.
Extreme nationalists, bro,
They
he's
have done
based.
so ever since.
Thank
Every
you,
missile,
UK.
every bomb,
What's some
every false
nationalistic
arrest,
UK song?
every piece of propaganda has been a flagrant assault not only on freedom,
Needs to listen to
but on our
something very
multilateral,
Brit supporting.
rules-based system. If we allow Russia to lay waste to what we have built here, the risks to world order, the risks to us all, are grave. For over a year and a half, Ukraine has been suffering the terrible consequences of Russia's war of choice. We must never forget the human cost. 9,500 people killed. 17,000 people injured.
Thank you.
Reports of 500,000
Shit,
military
thank you.
casualties on both sides.
What shall we do with
Russia
Drunken
has
Sailor?
callously targeted schools, hospitals, even
Thank you.
playgrounds. Ukrainians have been tortured,
Man, I can't imagine.
and
He's like,
they have been raped.
he's
Men,
so
women, and thousands of children
surprisingly
have been forcibly deported
good.
from their homes.
Like
And the
after
devastation
watching
flows
that
beyond
last
Ukraine's
pussy.
borders. Thanks to their destruction of thousands of tons of grain, the hungry and malnourished people of the developing world are Russia's victims too. That is why the United Kingdom will contribute a further £3 million to the World Food Programme to continue President Zelensky's Grain from Ukraine initiative.
Thank you.
Of course, the only way to end this widespread
It's a bit
suffering
quiet.
is through a just and lasting peace. Ukraine has demonstrated their commitment to peace time and time again.
Let me know if
including
it's better.
in Copenhagen and in Jeddah this summer. But they have also shown on the battlefield this summer that they are capable of restoring the sovereignty and territorial integrity that must be the foundations of any peace. Ukraine's counteroffensive has put Russia under pressure. In total, Ukraine has regained 50% of the territory seized since the war began. And in Kharkiv and Kherson, the yellow and blue flag flies high once again.
Thank
That
you,
flag
UK.
flies throughout the rest of the world, reflecting the solidarity we feel to Ukraine. Yet, we may wonder, what difference
Kherson.
does this support make when Russia seems so impervious to United Nations demands?
Okay.
When it seeks to fuel its aims with arms from sanctioned states such as Iran and the DPRK, and when it conducts sham elections in Ukraine's own sovereign territory. The truth is this: Russia knows the power of collective action because it tries so hard to weaken and divide the international community.
I have an idea for an
So,
alert. I need to
Just
write
as
it
we
down.
need to confront our biggest challenges on global poverty, on climate change, on artificial intelligence, collectively, we need effective multilateralism to achieve resolution, to seek
You have a
justice
Dylan
for the many, many victims,
Why are you
to
pointing
rebuild
out my
ruined
man as like
cities and create new opportunities,
a bad example of
to get
pronunciation?
grain
He's
exports
good at
flowing
pronouncing
again,
shit.
to help
I
put
think he's good at
Ukraine
pronouncing
back
shit. By the way, I need to
on
turn the
path
fan on. It's really,
to
really hot in here.
prosperity, to secure
Bro,
peace.
he's good.
And that is what we shall do.
What do you mean he ain't? Isn't he good? I remember watching his stream recently and I was surprised
I
at
thank
how
His
he
Excellency the Right
pronounced the shit.
Honourable Dowden for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Antony Blinken,
do I give me a
Secretary of
second?
State of the United States of America.
He's good, by the way.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for focusing the Security Council on this critically important issue. And Mr. Secretary General, thank you for the moral clarity that you've shown in dealing with Russia's war against Ukraine. We're grateful to have been able to welcome President Zelensky to this council table, and we thank him. We thank him for reminding us yesterday, today, and every day what's at stake in this conflict, not just for Ukraine, not just for Ukrainians, but for all of us. Fellow council members,
Maybe he's doing that on purpose.
2 weeks ago, I was in
Piska.
Yehidny, a small Ukrainian town about 2 hours north of Kyiv. Russian forces seized the village in the first days of the invasion. They went door to door, rounding up residents at gunpoint, marching them to the local elementary school, where
Wait,
Russian
does he say
soldiers
je?
set up a command post. Then,
Leave my man alone.
soldiers
He's
forced more
trying.
than
He's an
300
American.
civilians, mostly
They
women,
don't
children,
have your
and elderly people, into a basement not fit for human habitation.
fucking cruel.
Just a few small rooms,
Fucking
no
cruel.
windows, no
Man, I
circulation,
have to watch his
no
stream.
running water.
Ever since I started working, it's
The
really, really
soldiers
hard to
held
follow him.
residents there for 28
Like, I
straight
have to
days,
wake up at 5,
using them
and he
as human
starts the stream
shields
at midnight.
before fleeing when Ukrainian defenders arrived to liberate the town. In Yehidny, 2 residents took me into the basement where they and others had been imprisoned. My
Who
guide
doesn't
said
use
that
the
they were
alphabet?
packed together so tightly.
You're expecting
they
Americans
could
who
barely
struggle to
breathe.
speak English to be able to pronounce
There
it.
was
He
no room
doesn't
to
struggle
sit,
with speaking English.
let alone lie down.
Oh, come on.
When they cried out to their
Fucking
captors
cruel.
that people were sick and needed medical care, a Russian soldier yelled back, "Let them die." My guide pointed to 2 handwritten lists of names on the basement wall. One was for the villagers that Russian forces had executed. The other for the people who died in the basement. The oldest victim was 93 years old. The youngest, 6 weeks old.
Man.
The Russians only allowed the removal of bodies once a day. So children, parents,
He
husbands, and
Zelensky and need
wives
9,000
were
rockets
forced
to
to spend
bombast
hours
children.
next to the corpses of their loved ones. I begin here
Shit, someone gonna
because
screenshot that
from the
and
comfortable
put it in one
distance
of
this
those
chamber,
proof Ukraine is
it's really
Nazi
easy to lose sight
compilations.
of what it's like for Ukrainian victims of Russian aggression.
By the way, you know what I learned recently? And I learned it from
This
a
is what happened
Ukrainian.
in just one building, in one community.
You know bullshit about
in Ukraine.
Nuland giving
There are
out
so many others
cookies
like it.
to Maidan
In the last
protesters?
week alone, Russia has bombed apartment buildings.
You know she was giving cookies
in,
to the police too.
Ruby it's burned down humanitarian aid depots.
She
in
was
Lviv.
giving cookies to both
It's
sides.
demolished grain silos in Odessa.
Nuland
shelled 8
was
communities in
supposed
Sumy
to
in a
be
single
coming
day.
in with the role
This
of a
is what Ukrainian
peacekeeper.
families are living through every day.
Genuinely, her role
It's what
was
they've
supposed to be,
experienced for
guys, don't
574
fight.
days of this
Here's
full-scale
cookies.
invasion.
Let's hug.
It's what they'll endure tomorrow,
That's what she was
the day
doing
after
that.
for as long as Russia
All
wages
of the
its
time,
resistance
all
war.
this bullshit about her giving
A war that
snacks to Maidan
President Putin openly
supporters
declared from the
because
outset
this is proof
is
America
aimed at
organized
erasing
Maidan.
Ukraine from the map as a sovereign
All this
country
time, she was
and
giving
restoring
snacks to
Russia's
both
lost
sides
empire.
because they wanted.
In this
She
war,
wanted them to make
There's
peace.
an aggressor, and there is a victim.
Like
One side is
the way I've
attacking the core
understood it,
principles of the UN Charter.
Ukrainian position on this
The other fights
is
to
that the
defend them.
phone call. You remember the phone call
For
in
over a
which
year and
she
a half,
advocates for Yatsenyuk?
Russia has shredded
The
major
phone call
tenets of the
itself
United Nations
is
Charter,
her
Universal Declaration of Human Rights,
attempt
international
to
humanitarian
force
law,
peace.
and flouted one
Because
Security
Yats
Council
has
resolution
been
after another.
recommended
Let's
as the
review.
future prime minister
First,
by
Russia's
Yanukovych.
invasion itself violates the central
Like
pillars
she
of the UN
wanted
Charter.
to,
Respect
she
for the
wanted
sovereignty
two sides
and
to make
territorial
peace.
integrity of all nations. Second,
When she says fuck the
Russia's committing
EU,
war crimes and crimes against humanity in
the
Ukraine
idea is she
on an
actually
almost
meant
daily
fuck
basis.
the EU, like fuck the EU deal
Third,
Ukraine was supposed
Russia
to
continues
make.
to engage in reckless nuclear
Fuck that,
saber
because
rattling,
it's creating
announcing that it's
chaos.
stationing nuclear weapons in Belarus and continuing to use Europe's biggest nuclear power plant and its employees
Chinese cookies with
as a
America.
shield for its aggression, risking catastrophic consequences. Fourth, Russia is weaponizing hunger.
It would be fucking great you open it
Thanks
up
to the
and
Black
they're
Sea
just
Grain Initiative,
what,
brokered
picture
by the
of
Secretary
Obama's
General
face or whatever.
and Turkey, approximately 33 million metric tons of grain reached global markets, driving down food prices around the world. Nearly 2/3 of the wheat exported through that deal went to developing countries. Not only did Putin pull out of the deal, but Russia is now mining Ukraine's fields, bombing its ports and rails, burning its silos.
Based.
As a result,
Listen to
Ukraine's
him.
wheat exports will
Strong.
likely fall.
And then
by
you compare
2.8 million
this
metric
to
tons this
pageant
year.
queen talks from
That
the
is
last few
equivalent of
people
5.5
before the UK,
billion,
of course, right?
5.5 billion loaves
All
of bread
wars are bad.
trapped in the world's bread
We
basket.
should just stop all wars.
Russia,
Maybe we
meanwhile,
should just sit at the table
track
and
for a
have a
record year
talk.
of
As
grain
if we didn't
exports.
try that already.
The hungrier the
Maybe.
world is,
Maybe though.
the more Moscow profits. Fifth,
How
Russia is using
amazing
Iranian drones
is this when
to
compared?
attack
Holy shit.
Ukrainian civilians. Drones that Russia procured from Iran in violation of Security Council Resolution 2231.
Hey, Unix,
Finally,
Slava.
Just last week, Russia
He
hosted
was
North Korean
incompetent as
dictator
fuck,
Kim Jong-un.
definitely. Oh, definitely.
Putin said that they discussed ways to
Oh, look at this
cooperate
idiot pretending he
militarily,
can write.
while Kim
He's
pledged
drawing
to the
scribbles.
PRK's, and I quote, full and unconditional support,
Drawing
end
scribbles
quote,
around.
for Russia's war of aggression.
Drawing some dicks on paper.
Of course, the transfer of arms between Moscow and Pyongyang would violate multiple resolutions of this council.
Hello, Unix. If you are Slipper's
It's hard to imagine a
simping
country
target,
demonstrating more contempt for the
I
United
hope
Nations in all that it
you're
stands
having a
for.
great time.
This from a country with a permanent seat on this council. President Putin is betting
Out
that
of cash.
if he keeps doubling down on the violence,
Poor person.
that if he's willing to inflict enough suffering
I feel ya.
on enough people,
Hey, by the way, talking about poor people,
the world will cave on its principles.
is anyone
Ukraine
else
will
having
stop defending
problems with
But Ukrainians are not giving up,
subbing on Kick?
for they've seen what life would look like.
Like, is
If
anyone
they
else having
submit to
issues with
Russian
it? Because I
control.
tried to subscribe to
It's that
Topson on
basement
Kick,
in
and
your
I
history.
couldn't.
It's
I
families having
put
their
in my
children torn
card
away
info
from
and
them
everything, and it just
deported
keeps on
to Russia.
loading.
Children taken away
Why?
from their parents and deported far away.
For what reason?
It's the rubble of Mariupol.
Yeah, Tito sexual. We
It's
like
the
talking about
mass graves of
Tito.
Bucha.
I like talking about Tito. I like shitting on Tito.
We are not giving up either. Indeed, since we were last
I like
here,
specific stuff about
a
Tito,
growing
which is
number of countries
him
have come together
hating
to try to
Soviets.
forge a different way forward. In June, over a dozen countries met with Ukraine in Copenhagen to discuss the path toward a just and lasting peace, one that upholds the United Nations Charter and its core principles. 2 months later, more than 40 countries, including many members of this council, carried forward that discussion with Ukraine and Jeddah.
Adam and Sitch.
President Zelensky has put forward a 10-point plan for such a peace. President Putin has put forward
Based
nothing.
plan.
Now, some argue that
Mariupol.
continuing to stand with Ukraine and holding Russia accountable distracts us from addressing other priorities, like confronting the climate crisis, expanding economic opportunity, strengthening health systems. That is a false course.
Vala, thank you for a
And
sub
we must do
gift.
both. We are.
Have to take more Croatian shit. We're upping the
We must work
patriotism.
together to
Thank
tackle
you
the
for the
global
sub
challenges
gift.
that-
Thank you
that are
very, very
affecting our
much.
people, meet the Sustainable Development Goals, invest in a world where all people have an opportunity to reach their full potential. The United States is the world's leading contributor to these efforts.
Thank
And as
you,
President Biden told the General
USA.
Assembly yesterday, we will continue to do more
You
than
are
our
my
share
best friend.
to answer the imperatives of our time. At the same time, as President Biden has made clear, we must continue to shore up the pillars of peaceful relations among nations, without which we will be unable to achieve any of our goals. That's
Sergey.
why we must send a clear message, not only to Russia, but to all would-be aggressors, that we will stand up, not stand by, when the rules that we all agreed to
Give
are
us
being
attackums.
challenged. Not only to prevent conflict, instability, and suffering, but to lay the foundation for all that we can do to improve people's lives in times of peace. I opened by sharing the horrors that I saw in Yehidny. Let me close by telling you what else I saw that day in Ukraine.
Oh,
I saw volunteers rebuilding homes that had been razed by Russian bombs, farmers harvesting fields, people reopening businesses, citizens clearing mines and unexploded ordnance, children returning to schools. In short,
I like
I
attackums
saw a nation
as the
rebuilding
pronunciation.
and reclaiming its future. That is the right of all members of our United Nations. That's what we defend when we stand up for the international order. The right of people not only to survive, but to thrive, to write their own future.
Give us more weapons then.
Our people, Ukraine's people, the people of all nations, get to write their own future.
Give us more shit.
We cannot, we will not let one man write that future for us.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, USA. Strong
I
speech.
thank His Excellency
Strong
Mr. Blinken
speech,
for his
strong speech.
statement. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Sergey Lavrov, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Russian
shit.
Federation.
Oh shit.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General,
Oh
colleagues.
shit. Do we want to listen or do we want to
The
censor
existing
him?
international order was based on the ruins and following the colossal tragedy of the Second World War. Its basis was the Charter of the
life's a
United
colossal
Nations, became the
tragedy.
Charter of the United Nations, the key source of modern international law. Largely thanks to it, thanks to the United Nations, a new world war was averted, a new world war which was fraught with nuclear disaster. Unfortunately, after the end of the Cold War, the collective
Sounds
West,
like a
led by
woman.
the U.S., single-handedly decided that it would determine fates of all of humankind, and with its complex of superiority began to more frequently and broadly ignore the legacy of the founding fathers of the United Nations. Today, the West turns selectively to norms and principles from on a case-by-case basis, exclusively based on their parochial geopolitical needs. This has resulted in a shaking of global stability, as well as the exacerbation and fomenting of new hotbeds of tension, risks of global conflict.
He's being
conflict
silenced.
heightened.
That's what's happening.
In order to bring things on a peaceful path, the Russian Federation has and continues to insist
Peaceful path, my
on
dudes,
provisions of
peaceful
the
path.
United Nations Charter being respected and applied not selectively, but fully in their full and interconnected way. This includes the principle of the sovereign equality of states, non-intervention in their domestic affairs, respect for territorial sovereignty, and territorial integrity, and the right of peoples to self-determination. And the actions of the U.S. and their allies attest to the systematic violation of the balance of needs which have been enshrined in the Charter. Since the collapse of the USSR and the establishment of independent states in its place, the U.S. and its satellites have egregiously and openly interfered in the domestic affairs of Ukraine, as was publicly and even with pride recognized by
That's
the
how he's connecting it.
Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland in 2013. The $5 billion was spent on cultivating
He goes to
Ukrainian
Nuland.
politicians in Kyiv by the West. All of the facts are being swept under the rug. Their attempts to cancel all of what happened since prior to 2014. And for this reason, the theme
Was the
of today's
cookies. It was the
meeting, both by
cookies.
the Albanian presidency is most apt, which allows us to restore the chronological succession of events, specifically in the context of relations of the main acting parties in the implementation of the principles and the purposes of the UN Charter. In 2004 to 2005, the West, with the aim of bringing to power pro-American candidate, sanctioned the first coup in Kyiv, forcing the Constitutional Court of Ukraine to adopt an unlawful decision on the conduct of something which was stated in the Constitution, namely a third round of elections. And even more unceremonial intervention in domestic affairs was clear during the second Maidan in 2013 to 24. Then a litany of Western leaders directly encouraged participants in anti-government demonstrations and acts of violence. The same Victoria Nuland discussed with the U.S. ambassador in Kyiv the composition of the future government to be composed of putschists and the EU's real place in world policy. We all remember her.
Man, it's so
obscene
insulting though when you think
words
about it.
showing that the EU swallowed this.
Like the horse-faced
In
imbecile.
2014, the
He's
US
now here
selected
reading his
individuals
bullshit.
who became key
He's allowed
participants
the same
in
platform as anyone
brutal
else.
coup, which was organized, I would recall, one day after.
This is
what
fucking
was
depressing.
reached
This
under
is
the
like
guarantees of
watching
Germany,
goddamn
Poland, and
Twitch
France, and
debates.
referred to the agreement
And then you
between
have
the
Anna
legitimately elected
as the
president of
actual
Ukraine and
Ukrainian
the
having to
opposition
debate
leaders.
fucking
The
hobbits from
principle of
USA.
non-intervention in domestic affairs
It's insulting.
was repeatedly trampled
This
upon.
idea of,
Immediately
like,
after the coup, the putschists
pretending
announced that
they're
their
equally
top priority
worth
was to
hearing
deny
out.
the rights of Russian language speakers in Ukraine and the residents of Crimea and Southeast.
It's
of the
fucking
Federation
unfair.
choose
Thank you
to
for the cheer,
reconcile
Valo.
themselves to the outcomes of the coup. Were labeled terrorists if the operation was unleashed against them. In response to this, Crimea and Donbass conducted referenda fully in line with the principles of equality and
What a great way to silence you,
self-determination.
talking about bombing Donbass.
Paragraph 2 of Article 1 of the UN Charter. Western diplomats and politicians vis-a-vis Ukraine have been turning a blind eye to this important norm of international law. They have been trying to take all the background and the essence of what has happened and trying to distill this to the inadmissibility of violation of territorial integrity. Let us recall in this connection, a UN declaration was adopted unanimously in 1970. This is a declaration on the principle of international law pertaining
Kind of weird
to
she's
friendly
speaking so
relations and
quickly, though.
cooperation amongst states. In line with the Charter of the United Nations, enshrines the following: the principle for the respect of territorial integrity is applicable, I quote, to states who, in their actions, comply with the principle of equality and self-determination of peoples, and subsequently having governments which represent the
She has a copy in
people
English.
residing on the given territory. End of quote. To the fact that the Ukrainian
makes sense.
neo-Nazis who seized power in Kiev did not represent the population of Crimea.
The
and
Kiev
Donbass is
regime!
something which does not need to be proven. And the
Talking about Kiev
unconditional support
regime.
from Western capitals of the actions,
I
actions of the
sent
Kiev
a
regime is
message
nothing
to
other than a
Sternenko
violation of the principle of
to get
self-determination
the shits
subsequent
delivered to
English
Croatia.
violation,
They don't deliver
interference in domestic affairs.
outside of Ukraine anymore.
Poroshenko and Zelensky adopted racist laws on the prohibition
They
of everything Russian:
responded that I
education,
can send
media,
any
culture,
amount of money
the
to the armed
destruction
forces of
books
Ukraine,
and monuments,
and I'm going to
prohibition of
get the
Ukrainian Orthodox
print.
Church, seizure of its
Like they're going
property.
to send me the
These
print
all
image,
became
I
blatant
guess,
violations
and then
of
I can go and
Article
print
3,
it out
Article 1 of the
myself.
UN Charter on the respect for
And I
human
was like,
rights
yeah, sure.
and basic
So
freedoms
that's what
for
I'm gonna
all,
do.
without distinction
I'm
as
just
to
gonna
race,
print it myself.
gender, language, and religion.
Because they really want the
Not to
fucking
mention the fact
shit.
that these actions directly
And
run
also
counter to the
I do
Constitution of
donations
Ukraine
anyways,
itself, the
so
Constitution which sets out the obligation
plus
of the
plus.
state
But yeah, they
to
don't
respect
deliver
the
outside of
rights
Ukraine anymore,
Russian
in
and
case any of
other
you were interested.
national minorities. When we hear calls for implementation of the peace formula to bring Ukraine back to the 1991 borders, a question arises, who's being called for this? Those calling for this, are they familiar with the statements of Ukrainian leadership about what they intend to do with the residents of the relevant territories? And with respect to them, publicly, at the official level, repeatedly there have been threats voiced of their physical or legal annihilation.
Yeah, sure.
Incidentally, similarly, Western not only has not been deterring its Western protégés in Kiev, but has enthusiastically been encouraging this anti-Russian policy. Incidentally, similarly, members of the EU and NATO have for decades been encouraging the actions of Latvia and Estonia to strip the rights of hundreds of thousands of Russian language residents who have been called non-citizens. Now there is a serious discussion for the introduction of criminal
Everyone hates
responsibility,
Russians.
criminal liability for the use of their mother tongue. Senior officials
Oh, they're gonna go
officially
to
state
jail for
that
speaking Russian.
the spread of information about the possibility of remote school programs, that this possibility needs to be considered as something almost a threat to national security.
Yeah, the translator
which
has been
requires
out
the
of breath
attention
for a
of law
while.
enforcement bodies. Turning back to Ukraine, in February 2015, the Minsk agreements were reached, and this included they were approved by a Special Security Council resolution, fully in line with Article 36 of the Charter, which supports, I quote, any procedure for the resolution of disputes that was adopted by the parties. In this specific case, Kiev, Donetsk, and Lugansk. However, last year, all of the signatories of the Minsk agreements, except for Mr. Putin, I refer to Merkel, Hollande, and Poroshenko, publicly, and with some kind of pleasure even, recognized that having signed this document, they had no intention of implementing it. They were simply looking to gain time to shore up the
He's still
military
eating
capability of
shit.
Ukraine and to funnel weapons into the country to
This
be
whole
used against Russia.
speech.
For all of these years, if
He's
the
just
EU and NATO
using
directly
the same
supported
stupid-ass
sabotage of the Minsk
Twitter
agreements,
lies we've
encouraged the
seen
Kiev regime to
already.
use force
Nothing
to
new.
address problems in Donbass, and this was all in breach of Article 25 of the Charter, according to which all members of the United Nations agreed to accept.
You just started saying blah 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 to translate.
Let us
They
recall
wouldn't
that the
notice.
package with the Minsk agreements, the
Should just be like
Russia,
horse
Germany,
sounds
France,
over and
Ukraine
over.
signed a declaration
Yeah.
where Berlin and Paris assumed an obligation to do a lot, including to help to restore the banking system in Donbass. But they didn't move a finger. They merely observed how, contrary to all of those obligations, Poroshenko announced a trade, economic, and transport blockade against Donbass. In that same declaration, Berlin and Paris assumed an obligation to comply with a trilateral agreement.
You're talking about Lavrov.
Russia, Ukraine.
You know, this is the man who commented on Budapest Memorandum.
To Russia in the area of trade,
in 2014, he claimed that Budapest Memorandum doesn't actually prohibit aggression on Ukraine. It prohibits nuclear aggression only. So we were allowed to invade Ukraine, we were just not allowed to use nukes on it. And then he posted a link to the Budapest Memorandum, which very clearly says that no aggression is allowed because security assurances were given regarding all forms of aggression, not just the nuclear one. So when he lies about Minsk, I'm not even sure if he is genuinely lying or if he is unable to understand what the Minsk were.
On the unconditional implementation of the Minsk agreements, which emerged as a result of negotiations.
Unconditional?
And this is all fully in line with the Charter of
Russian-backed forces kept on attacking, and he's talking about unconditional?
For the just and respect for obligations. Which
Maybe he should have pulled them back then.
And other sources of
Maybe he should have demilitarized.
End of quote. And Western colleagues trampled upon this principle as well.
Unconditional.
When they signed onto these documents, knowing in advance that they had no intention, would not comply with this. This has been repeatedly seen, and Mr. Putin referred to this repeatedly, including recently. And I'd like to remind
that too includes Crimea. Yeah, that too.
That President Zelensky signed a decree prohibiting the conduct of negotiations with the government of Putin. If the U.S. is
yes, of course he did.
I don't think it would be very difficult to give the command for the decree of Zelensky to be lifted. Now, in our Western opponents' rhetoric, we hear slogans, invasion, aggression.
I kind of like that, though. I kind of like his pointing this out. It's like, oh, USA all this time has been playing Ukraine like a puppet. But also, Ukraine has banned this. So, USA, please do something. USA, please tell them to stop.
Based on facts and respect for all of the requirements of the UN Charter, something which the West has avoided. And it seemed that there is a fear of professional discussions that would reveal demagoguery with incantations of territorial integrity. Former colonial powers failed to mention the need for Paris to return the so-called French Mayotte and the composition of the islands, for London to withdraw from the Chagos archipelago, to begin discussions with Buenos Aires.
He's doing the whole thing with
the supporters of champions of territorial integrity in Ukraine.
Whataboutism.
As if they don't even remember the sense of the Minsk agreements, which lies, I recall, in the reunification of Donbass and Ukraine, with a guarantee for respect for the fundamental human rights. First and foremost, the right to one's mother tongue. Having torn apart these agreements, the West now bears full responsibility for
your mother tongue
and for the fomenting of civil war there. Other principles in the Charter, respect for which could have prevented the security crisis in Europe and could help to reach an agreement on the basis of balance of interest, I would mention Article 2 of Article 8, which sets out the need to develop the practice of peaceful resolution of dispute with the assistance of regional organizations. In line with this principle,
dispute.
Together with our allies,
you're fucking invasion.
The restoration of
it's not a dispute to be solved.
Organization, the CSTO, and NATO to facilitate the practical implementation of the above-mentioned
dispute.
Of the OSCE summit.
As if you're having debates over who owns a part.
Among other things, I quote, not a single state, group of states, organization can be vested with primary responsibility for the maintenance of peace and security and stability in the OSCE region, or consider any part of that region as a sphere of influence, of its influence. It's clear to all that this is specifically what NATO was doing in its attempt to create a
he goes not a single state, and then he brings it to NATO, as if NATO is a state he was referring to. I thought he was going to mention USA, but like he's saying NATO.
Bodies of the CSTO to NATO were disregarded. The reason for such an arrogant position of the U.S. and their allies, as we see once again today, lies in an unwillingness to engage in any equitable dialogue with any party. If NATO had not rejected the proposal of the CSTO to cooperate,
and the fact he's allowed to sit there is fucking insulting already.
Numerous negative processes which resulted in the current European crisis, because Russia had been not listened to or deceived for decades. Today, at the close of the presidency, we are discussing effective multilateralism. Let us not forget the numerous facts of the genetic avoidance of the West of any forms of equitable cooperation. Consider Joseph Borrell's pearl that Europe is a flourishing garden surrounded by jungles. This is purely neo-colonialism with disregard for sovereign equality of states and the need to disregard for strengthening the principles of the UN through effective multilateralism. Trying to prevent democratization in international relations, the U.S. and its allies are openly and unceremoniously trying
Bro, Russia's a jungle, I can agree with that.
The UN and
Can't agree with the rest. Can't agree with the rest. Giving Ruskies ammunition, yeah, that's true. It's like, who was the Ukrainian dude who recently commented on China and India? It's like that, it's like,
stringent compliance with the charter, not just by member states, but also by the Secretariat of our organization.
I feel we are learning recently how...
The Secretariat has an obligation to act impartially and should not receive any
How to say this?
any government. We have already talked about Article 2.
Some of our politicians are.
I wish to draw attention to a key point, paragraph 1, an organization based on the principles of sovereign equality of states. Building upon this principle, the General Assembly, the above-mentioned 1970 declaration.
No, we do have some politicians, but also it reminds me of
to select for itself the political, economic,
what's the
social,
name?
and cultural system without intervention.
The European Union one who said that we are going to punish Italy if they vote for Meloni. You know, it's stuff like that. There's.
Delivered on the 29th of March. That, and I
it's
quote,
surprising they haven't been taught how to
does not guarantee stability. This
shut
is
up.
A catalyst for chaos and conflict. And robust democratic societies are capable of correcting themselves, improving themselves. They can
like sometimes I don't know. It's like
radical change without any blood.
You know how like big Twitch streamers will sometimes talk about how you must choose words carefully because you're gonna get clipped out of context. I can remember Destiny doing a whole stream on this, on like how when he forms an opinion on something, when he says it on stream, he has to be really careful about the way he says it, because you always gotta assume that people clipping you are going to take it out of context in the worst way possible. It's like we need to show that to every single politician we have. Like, maybe think a little tiny bit before speaking, you know, maybe think. Maybe be careful. Because your words are going to be used against you, and we really don't need that. We really don't need that shit. There's human lives at stake. We can't afford this bullshit. Merkel, it wasn't Merkel, it was, I completely blocked her name, no. Wasn't Merkel, though. Merkel was stupid on her trying to save her reputation. Because the entire thing about Minsk, which even the horse-faced loser has been quoting, the entire thing with Minsk was her trying to save her ass. She was trying to save her ass. So she claimed that, you know, when they signed Minsk, they knew Russia is going to betray it. She didn't say that they didn't intend to follow through. And realistically, it wasn't even on them to follow through. It was on Ukraine to follow through, and Ukraine tried to follow through, and the Russians kept on attacking. But she didn't say that they didn't mean to follow through. She said that they had expected Russia is going to betray the deal. And because of this, they were ready to help Ukraine prepare for that, which is what has happened, right? But I do think even for her, the way she said it, it was like, you know, did you not think about how you sound sometimes?
Serbia, Turkey, and others, they'll wait, but the Nazis can skip the queue to enter the ranks of the EU. Incidentally, at the same Summit for Democracy,
Skade is
proclaimed that democracy
interesting.
emanates from
Skade
the
has
Charter
been
of the
rather
United
interesting
Nations. The first words
lately.
of the Charter, we the people, reflects the fundamental
He's attempting
source
to
of
comment on
legitimacy,
Azerbaijan and
the
Armenia
consent
recently.
of the governed.
Some kind of
It is useful to compare this
part of me wants to know, part of me doesn't want to know what his opinion is.
Beginning with the
I'm like half-half. Oh no, I'm trying to add like one layer of Croatian patriotism whenever we get a sub. So face paint is my step number one. And also I like having it.
Integrity of Ukraine. Those who, contrary to the charter, divides
Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Skåde! Did he even say which side he's on? I wonder which side he would be on.
I won't answer for. Wait for an answer. So there's a question about the relationship between the Security Council and the General Assembly. The Western aggressive clique has been peddling the theme of abuse of the right of veto, and not with an incorrect focus on members of the UN. They have reached the result. This was resulted in a situation that after every
I saw one of them actually. Now that you've reminded me
the
of
General
it.
Assembly considers the matter. This is not a problem for us at all because the Russian
I saw one of them saying that Armenia-Azerbaijan thing has been started by CIA to force Russia into military action to help Armenia, and then it would be easier for Ukrainians to be beating Russia on the battlefield. It was a cute little theory, and also I wonder how they had to update it now, considering the fact that a ceasefire has been reached.
Why certain resolutions without any veto that were adopted, including those many years ago, but are not being implemented, despite the provisions of Article 25 of the Charter? Why would the General Assembly not consider the reasons behind this? This includes resolutions of the Security Council of Palestine,
You open the beer.
range of issues related to the Middle
The
East,
girl makes me nervous, to be honest.
2202, which approved the Minsk
The
agreements
the girl makes me nervous. It's like she's speaking very, very quickly.
Regimes. This is now
And she's out of breath, and it's like she's
protracted negotiations, fully in line with the charter,
almost panicking.
adopt sanctions against a specific
I don't know.
country. Subsequently, the US
She makes me want to, open a beer for her.
Same state. Additional
As Zarija say, the Armenians? Yeah, I do think there's going to be big likelihood of problems happening in the region after the ceasefire. Big possibility of ethnic cleansing happening in the region. I'm very, very worried about that.
Adopted a decision through their national legislative bodies, for example, to
Guy on the right? Like,
extend
imagine being in the speech like right next to Lavrov, though. He just keeps on going, though. He keeps on fucking going. Russia is seeming like the good guys in the conflict. Russia did nothing to help Armenia, though. Russia did nothing to help Armenia. They had a chance to help. They did absolutely nothing. When Armenia started raising the problem of the corridor being blocked by Azerbaijan, Russia did nothing.
The adoption of any sanctions by the Security Council not being
Armenia
overridden by
called
the
for
consent
Russia
of
to
both.
help, and
Also
Russia was like,
important is for
"Ha,
sanctions regime
fuck
through
you.
the Security Council to be time-bound
You're a
insofar
small,
as
worthless
there being
country. We
unlimited
don't
in
need you.
nature,
We're gonna
deprives
do
the Council of
nothing."
flexibility vis-a-vis,
They just
the
completely
impact
and
on
fully
the
betray them.
sanction government's policy. There is a need to consider humanitarian limitations of sanctions. For sanctions
This guy is still talking.
projects
Yeah, he keeps on talking
introduced
for a
at the
very long
Security
time. He's
Council
getting
should be
really, really
accompanied
boring.
by assessments about their
He has
consequences
gotten
for,
boring previously, but like now he's extra boring. He just keeps on going.
rather than being accompanied by demagogical
Oh shit, Azerbaijani forces just killed 8 Russian soldiers in Karabakh. What?
We see
Russians?
We see a deep crisis in international relations and the lack of willingness to redress this situation by the West. And the organization is responsible for the fate of the world in the historic context. There's a need to abandon parochial, short-sighted arrangements and national elections of any given member state being taken into account. Let us once again recall, nearly 80 years ago, having signed on to the UN Charter, world leaders agreed to respect the sovereign equality of all states, large states, small states, poor ones, rich ones, monarchies, republics. In other words, even then, humankind recognized the need for equitable, polycentric world order as a guarantee for the sustainability and security of its development. For this reason, we're not talking today about subordinating ourselves to some kind of a rules-based order.
Boring little fucker. Let me refresh this. Shoigu. Oh, Shoigu! In Russia, those who evade mobilization will be detained at railway stations and airports. Weren't they doing that already? Weren't they already detaining people for this shit? Am I mistaken? Did he finish? Thank you. Thank you. Horsehead is done.
To Her Excellency.
This was just useless.
I'm very glad to see
Same.
Affairs in Europe for the Republic of France.
Oh, Frenchies. Okay, what's our expectations of Frenchies? Come on.
I'm very glad to see this.
Microphone, please. I thank the Secretary General for his remarks. I wish to take this opportunity to begin by applauding the statement delivered by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. For the past 18 months, he has been embodied Ukrainian action. He has been the countenance and the voice of millions of Ukrainian people who have been fighting for their freedom with admirable courage.
Need to make what they say look better and more based. Oh shit.
His call
like UK coming after.
Something which we need to respond to. On 24 February 2022, the Russian Federation chose to unleash a war of aggression against the sovereign state in violation of all its international commitments and principles.
Okay, strong. Here's the yes, Kim, look at woman. Kim, quickly, Kim, look, woman, Kim.
The Russian desire to restore its
screenshot it for Kim.
of an imperial past, despite the fact that this had been condemned by history. This in Ukraine is evidently the main victim of this war. Ukraine and its people.
All of the translators are women.
Every day endure
women are the only ones allowed to have a voice. We are using the men just for the physical looks.
Thousands of Ukrainian children
That's
have
sexism.
been forcefully abducted from their families and transferred to the Russian Federation.
France-based.
This is an abomination. Ukrainian women, men, children have endured mass rape, which has been used as a war crime. Another crime.
Nice, thank you, France.
Yes, this war is a war against Ukraine, against the Ukrainian people.
So far, so good.
But this is also a war against the rules of international life. For this is a war against the most basic principles of our shared charter. First and foremost,
I disagree with invading
the
Russia.
sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. This is a war against
I
the
think we shouldn't waste money,
of the United Nations.
nor resources,
This is a war
nor
against
human
the
power
pillars of our collective security.
on Russia.
At a time when Russia has
I think what we need to do is kick them out of Ukraine, get Ukraine into NATO, get Ukraine into European Union, build a wall,
this is a war against
let Russians do whatever they want with that country.
Against cultural
they want to do a reform,
Russia has been targeting in
they can
Odessa
fight for it.
And elsewhere,
they want to keep being a shithole they are,
food security with
they can continue doing that. But I think we shouldn't be doing a single thing about it.
And more than
I don't think we should go split Russia into pieces. I don't think we should go change the regime in Russia. I don't think any of that would help. Maybe splitting it into pieces, but like changing the regime, whoever you install is going to be the same shit. So I don't think we should be wasting anything.
And we need to consider the moral implications of this. This is a war which concerns all of us. For this reason, we will not waver. In the face of this aggression and the destabilization that it has generated throughout the world, only a handful of states, which states one should consider, support the catastrophic choice of Russia. The General Assembly, like the Security Council, are largely united around
my
shared
fear is that if we split it up, it's going to be
position back to back the aggressor
in Serbian situation.
This approach delivers neither peace nor justice nor stability.
Is going to be being like,
look
how great we were until the evil West came and fucked us up, and then they will never have to move away from their bullshit. They will be weaker though, so I'm seeing that as a positive thing. They will not have ethnic minorities to be conscripting anymore.
Almost all countries,
and it's kind of
present
unlikely they
here
would want to
at
send,
this
Moscows to the war.
have, in their more or less recent
But they will want to
history,
expand more.
endured the trauma of war.
They will still believe in the Greater
experienced
Russia.
this firsthand, the destruction, the human
Split Moscow
tragedy
from the rest
which
of
it
the
carries
Federation,
in
that
its
might
wake,
actually
and
be the
they
best.
know that it is never
I
a
just, I
solution.
don't know if we can do it in a
Tomorrow,
way that's not
as
going
is the
to
case with every 21st of September, we
give them more
commemorate
excuses as
the
to why they are a
World Day
shithole.
of
You know what I mean?
Peace. And we have a responsibility and a moral duty to act to end this aggression by Russia. The General
Russia with
Assembly,
Australia.
as and the AU expressly
Chunk
called
it in the
for.
middle of the ocean.
On 21
I
September,
just send
as
Moscovia there in the
has been
first
the
place.
case every day since the outbreak of this war, France has been mobilized and will continue to mobilize to thwart
Thank you,
this aggression
Frenchies.
for our common good. France will continue to act on the basis of shared principles. The principle of legitimate defense recognized by our charter.
This was
will
at the start. I
continue
don't
to
know if you guys
pursue
saw it. This was at the
military and
start.
civil
But yeah, it is.
support
It is what it
and
was.
civilian support
It is what
to
it was.
provide Ukraine with
At one
what is
point,
necessary for it to resist
the bold
aggression.
fucker
The
goes,
principle of justice
it's
and
very
dignity
unfair
will
that
continue to
Zelensky is
support
here
Ukrainian
speaking.
and international
And
jurisdictions to ensure that there is no
Albanian
impunity
PM
for
says,
crimes
oh, if you
perpetrated
don't
by
want
Russia.
Ukrainians,
solidarity. We will
Ukrainian
continue
representative to be
pursue and
speaking
step up
at the UN Security
our
Council, you can
tangible
always
support
just
for the
pull back your
countries
troops
most
from
hard hit
Ukraine.
by the global food crisis
And the war is going to
evoked
end.
by Russia.
And we won't have a
And
reason to listen to them
we
here
will step
anymore.
up our humanitarian assistance to benefit people in need throughout
He was
the
based.
world.
He was very, very, very based.
Mr. President, the primacy of law over force, international solidarity, and support for the most vulnerable are
The video
principles
is
which lie at
available
the
online.
heart of President Zelensky's
It was a very good
peace
response. I was surprised by
formula.
it.
This is why each day
This
more and
is
more of
why-
us support it. I call upon all states who have not yet done so to work to that end. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Madame Colonna for her statement. And I now give the floor to His Excellency
Fun
Mr.
fact, there's a,
Paulo Vieira, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Federative Republic of Brazil.
Conspiracy. There was a conspiracy theory
I
that
thank the
the first
presidency of
person
the
who
Security
figured out
Council
dodecahedron
for organizing
exists
this meeting.
got drowned by
Mr.
Pythagoras
President,
himself.
the conflict in
He actually
Ukraine
did
has
drown.
added numerous stresses to the multilateral system,
What do we expect?
which was already subject to
do
multiple
we expect?
complex challenges and increasing dissent. The current context of polarization and distrust does not create favorable conditions for the multilateral instances of international peace and
You don't
security
say.
to operate effectively. The world is facing the highest number of violent conflicts since World War II.
Okay.
And 2 billion people, a quarter of humanity, are living in areas affected by conflicts. Yet, our collective institutions are not adequately responding to these challenges. As the concept note of this debate rightly points out, the inability of the Security Council to adequately fulfill its mandate is undermining its credibility and
Kinda
leading to
snoozing,
renewed
yeah.
calls for its long overdue reform.
Like, I'm very interested. I just wish there was a
In
way
these
to
troubled times, a daunting
watch them in extra speed.
violations of core
Because they
values of
speak
the
very
principles of the United
slowly
Nations,
and very broadly.
Brazil has been encouraging member states
If you
to
took their
revive the
speech
spirit of San Francisco in the search for peace
and you put it in one of
for
those
present and future
AI
generations,
paraphrasing
which is the
things
fundamental mission of this organization.
to shorten
Brazil fully respects and
down, it
upholds the
feels
right
like
of
most of them would
self-defense
have
of all member states under
like a
Article
few
51
words to say, a few
of
sentences
UN
only, and that's
Charter.
it. Everything else is the
At
filler.
the same time,
Oh, I know you usually
we
can. The
must
problem is that this
recognize
is going
that
live.
the recent escalation in the conflict, with the introduction of even more sophisticated
So I'm
weapons
pretty sure it
and
doesn't work like that.
ammunition, or the
Unless you,
inadmissible threat of
I
use
guess,
of nuclear weapons,
somehow,
seriously
like I know I'm missing a
undermines
few
peace and
seconds because I had it
security
paused before
well
the
beyond the
stream.
battlefield.
I guess they
violating
would
the
be able
core
to speed it up for like a
principles
few
and
seconds until we
provisions of
reach
the
where we are
UN
supposed to
Charter.
be, and that's it.
This dynamic has grave consequences, above all for the civilian population, in particular women
Most of them say
and
the same
children
shit.
who are disproportionately affected by wars. The destruction of civilian infrastructure
By whom?
worsens the humanitarian crisis, especially as winter approaches. Moreover, the persistent threat to the integrity of nuclear facilities risks a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. Mr. President, as we have consistently noted, the war in Ukraine also affects other regions, especially as developing countries bear the burden of food and energy insecurity. We welcome the Secretary General's effort to explore alternatives to alleviate the suffering of millions of people who once again face hunger or the threat of hunger. Brazil strongly supports a resumption of the Black Sea Grain Initiative under terms that would be acceptable to all concerned parties. Brazil also underscores the need for addressing the root causes of food and energy insecurity, such as excessively high interest rates and external debt that severely impact prices and the ability of developing countries to invest in sustainable food and energy production.
They called me a bold, stupid fucker.
The current
What you gonna do
international
about
financial structure is not well equipped to assist these
Yes,
countries
this one.
address their major challenges.
This was at the start.
As recently announced by President Lula, Brazil will launch during our
that as far as you repeated many times, that the violation here is about President Zelensky speaking before the Council members. There is a solution for this if you agree. You stop the war and President Zelensky will not take the floor. As far as you repeated many times.
Look at the bold fucker, by the way, he's playing with his pencils.
This is an obligation of all member states under Article 33 of the UN Charter.
Yeah, Albania has been very surprising.
Solution to this
I'm a full Kosovo supporter right now.
Only a political solution that takes
full
into
Kosovo
account
fucking supporter after
the
this.
Purpose and principles of
Kosovo
the UN
already had
Charter
amazing leadership. Okay, Kosovo government is better than like most of our fucking governments.
Lasting peace.
And now this.
The international community will have to assist the parties to come to a negotiated and lasting solution. Brazil is prepared to do its part. Mr. President, the space for diplomacy and peaceful solution is narrowing. We must set aside practices that only deepen the divisions instead of contributing to a more peaceful world and work together for a renewed multilateralism. Brazil firmly advocates for mediation
like they
and
just walked out of
preventive
Russian prison. They probably
diplomacy
did.
as indispensable tools to prevent the
They probably.
escalation of crisis. With this view, Brazil has been
have a
engaged
saying
in
here.
several fora to deal
We
with
have
the
a saying
Ukrainian
here.
crisis. We have sent high
they all piss in
representatives
the
to
same bucket.
Copenhagen and Jeddah. We have also spoken
It's like
bilaterally to the concerned
it's
parties.
mostly used when you
We
wanna
strongly
complain
encourage
to your
that in
government
these
officials
conversations,
about other
both
government
parties should
officials.
be heard and their views carefully taken into consideration.
It's like there's no point.
Talking to only
You go
one
to complain to
part
your
or
mayor
the
about
other
what
will not
someone
help
on a more local
advancing
level
the
has been
cause of
doing.
durable
It
peace.
makes no sense because they all deal with corruption
suggested
equally.
will be
They
the
both
only way
steal your
forward
cash
to
money
enable
equally.
peaceful
They're
negotiations.
buddies.
With that in mind,
So you're trying to
we
create a rift between
will
them will not
organize
work,
next
and you will
month
be the one who
during
is
our
suffering in the end.
presidency
They'll
of the
piss in the
Security
same
Council,
bucket.
a high-level open
And
debate
for
on the
Russians, I think it's very much the same. You know, you're like, oh, they just walked out of Russian prison. They probably did.
to the
They probably
prevention
fucking did, you
and
know. They probably were buddies.
peaceful resolution
They're all
of
interconnected.
disputes. I count
an
on
oligarchy
your
after all.
participation in October. Thank you, Mr. President.
Oh,
I thank His Excellency
good flag.
Mr. Vieira
Good flag.
for
Good
his
flag.
statement. And now I give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Mariam Al-Mahiri, Minister of Climate Change and Environment, Chief of the International Affairs Office at the Presidential
Norway,
Court
yeah,
of
Norway.
the United Arab
Thank you,
Emirates.
Norway. You are my
Thank
best
you,
friend.
Mr.
You're the
President.
peacekeeper.
I
You are the
extend
legend.
my gratitude to Secretary General Guterres for his
Peace
valuable
jugs.
briefing and
Do
wish
you
to
use
acknowledge
peace jugs while
the
you
heads
play
of state and
League of
government and other
Legends?
high-level representatives present today. I also welcome the participation of President Zelensky. I commend Albania for convening this critical open debate.
I was trying to
UAE
figure out
has
if like
long
the
advocated
translator's
for a
really, really
peaceful
good, or if that's
resolution
her
to the
speaking.
war in Ukraine that upholds
Oh, what?
the UN Charter. The war has wrought a devastating toll on human life,
Okay.
including the displacement of almost 2 out of every 3 children in Ukraine.
Okay.
The country now bears the grim record for the highest concentration of landmines in the world, rendering nearly 1/3 of the country no longer safe due to unexploded
War because of who?
ordnance.
Come on.
This conflict has further ravaged food and transport infrastructure.
You can do it. You can do
We
it.
stress once again the need for all parties to comply with their obligations under international humanitarian law and specifically the protection of those objects indispensable to the survival of the civilian population.
I just get a huge
We are
machine.
deeply concerned by the
Huge
ramifications of the
exoskeleton.
destruction of infrastructure on survivor services, healthcare,
Super soldier
and
type of
other
thing.
critical forms of support, especially on women and children, who already bear the brunt of armed conflict. The UAE has pledged $100 million US to help address the humanitarian crisis. We have
Slippers,
sent
tell your
11
mommy
airlifts of relief and medical supplies
to
for
write a better
children
speech.
and the elderly, provided more than 2,500 generators, and sent 23 ambulances just this week. The UAE has also provided $4 million US in funding for First Lady Olena Zelenska's foundation's programming
you.
for orphans. Beyond Ukraine, the war's global ripple effects are evident, especially in the pronounced impact on food
8 Russian
security,
peacekeeping
including
soldiers
in
have
our
been
own
killed
region.
in an Azerbaijani
Let me
missile strike on a
restate
Russian
that
vehicle.
the UAE remains steadfast in supporting the renewal of the Black Sea Grain Initiative
Damn, bro, my
and
dude,
the
I've
full
got it turning into
implementation of the
Azerbaijan.
MOU on
It's
Russian
about-
fertilizers and food products, as well as any discussions that support these goals. Mr.
No,
President,
fuck Azerbaijan
while
for
crucial,
attempting the ethnic
these
cleansing,
measures
but that's
only
kind of funny.
alleviate rather than end suffering. World leaders, especially this week in the General Assembly, have
Can't
made
feel
clear
bad about it.
the global desire for a just and sustainable peace in Ukraine, one that upholds the UN Charter. A diverse set of countries is increasingly coming together around the common cause of peace in Ukraine. We welcome the role played by countries such as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and China, as well as the African Peace Initiative, in supporting all possible routes to a peaceful settlement.
Okay.
In these calls, there is growing recognition of the urgency of the task, not just for Ukraine, but for all of us. The war amplified the erosion of faith in multilateralism. Achieving peace can begin its restoration. Of course, peace will only come out of diplomatic talks between Russia and Ukraine, and it will only be just and
Slippers.
sustainable if it upholds the UN Charter.
Slippers.
The UN Security
Why is
Council
she saying
and its
this?
members
Slippers.
have a vital role to play in this process. We can encourage and incentivize de-escalation, extend the urgency to uphold the UN Charter to every file before us,
Can't hear it.
and
There's
expand
nothing
the
you're
circle
missing.
of peacemakers to reflect today's global realities.
Wait, really? Is she that
We
quiet?
would welcome an increasingly representative council and believe the discussions on Security Council reform should move forward with serious intention. Though the path to peace in Ukraine may be audacious, it doesn't license inaction. There is only one sustainable path to a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, in line with the UN Charter and preserving its sovereignty, independence, and
Dumping to
territorial
Moscow.
integrity, and the UAE stands ready to support that objective. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Her Excellency, Ms. Almairi, for her statement, and I give
Pussy
the floor
speech.
to His Excellency, Mr. Ma Jiaosu, Executive Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China.
Oof.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Oof.
Mr. President, China's position on the Ukraine issue is consistent and clear. President Xi Jinping put forward 4 points on what must be done, 4 things the international community must do together, and 3 observations. They have become fundamental guidance for China to handle the Ukraine issue. We believe that the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of all countries should be respected. The purposes and the principle of the UN Charter observed. the legitimate security concerns of all countries
Pussy
taken
so far.
seriously, and all efforts conducive to resolving the crisis supported. In February this year, we released China's position on the political settlement of the Ukraine crisis, laying out 12 propositions including respecting sovereignty, ceasing hostilities, resuming talks, stopping unilateral sanctions, etc. The core message is facilitating talks for peace. China has maintained close communication on the Ukraine crisis with various relevant parties and the rest of the international community. The special representative of the Chinese government on Eurasian affairs has visited countries concerned and attended the International Conference on Ukraine in Jeddah.
Right now, Lavrov has been
China has
incorrect.
facilitated talks for peace
Right now,
in
what
its
you
own
can
way,
see on the screen is Lavrov talking
and
shit.
played a positive
And also the
constructive
Chinese
role
representative
in
being a
resolving the
little
Ukraine
pussy.
crisis. Mr. President,
He has a funny little
the
combo.
Ukraine crisis is still on. The intense situation on the battleground and the accumulating
Ensure
risks
peace
of
in Ukraine. We
spillover
blocked Taiwan with our fleet.
have exerted a significant impact internationally. The Ukraine crisis has become what it is today for a variety of deep and complex reasons.
Russia
A
eating shit
prolonged
being
and
the main one of
expanded
them.
Ukraine crisis is in no one's interest. In light of the current situation, I would like to stress on the following 4 points. First, stay committed to facilitating talks for peace. History has proven that conflict produces no winner and war cannot solve problems. The pursuit of one's absolute security, all efforts to stoke bloc confrontation will only intensify disagreement and conflict and will come to no good. However complicated the situation or challenging the task, it is important to stick to the general direction of political settlement, help parties concerned to build consensus, initiate talks for peace, and cease hostilities at an early date. To this end, the international community needs to create necessary conditions and atmosphere. Relevant parties need to take a long view, uphold the vision of common,
These people are just making me
comprehensive,
fucking angry. I
cooperative,
just
and
want to go and
sustainable
donate to buy
security,
some drones.
respect each other's legitimate security concerns,
Like that's
and
the only
promote
thing on
the
my mind right
building
now.
of a
I want to
balanced,
go
effective,
and I want to
and
find a
sustainable security
fundraiser
architecture
and I want to donate
in
to
Europe.
some drones. And then I want to watch the
Second,
footage from this drone
avoid
blowing
pouring
some fuckers
oil
up.
over the fire.
And that's the
All
only thing that's
parties
going to
should exercise
change the
restraint
current
and
feeling
not
of just
increase or escalate tension.
sliminess.
Refrain from taking any initiatives that lead to a steady escalation of the situation, and work to create necessary conditions for political settlement. We should safeguard the bottom line of nuclear security and prevent man-made nuclear accident.
Like
Third,
one
manage
side
the
is
spillover
threatening to
risks.
use the nukes here.
The
One
Ukraine
fucking
crisis
side
has
is threatening
dealt
to
a
use the
heavy blow
nukes, and you
toward
can't even
economic
name it
recovery
because you're
and
such a
global
pussy.
development, and severely affected the world food, energy, and financial security. Developing countries are the first to bear the brunt.
Not safe for stream.
Relevant countries should stop abusing unilateral sanctions and long-arm jurisdiction
What's next
and
up?
protect the security and the smooth operation of global production and supply chains. We support relevant parties in maintaining communication
Russian
with
athlete
Russia and
Yelena
Ukraine on the
deleted a
Black
photo with
Sea
Vladimir
Green
Putin
Deal
from Instagram.
and assuming the deal on the basis of balanced
Photo was posted in
consideration of the
November
concerns of both
2017,
sides,
before the
with a
presidential
view
election.
to earnestly protecting global food
She moved to
security.
Spain.
Fourth,
I'm a person of
ease the
peace.
humanitarian crisis.
Always have been and
In
will remain so. Full
2023,
of shit.
as many as
After that, a photo
339
from a
million people around the
2019
world
trip to an
are
extreme
in need
disappeared
of
from her
humanitarian
Instagram,
aid,
as
some
well as a
70
birthday
million
greeting
more
to
than at the
Shoigu.
beginning of 2022. The Ukraine crisis has produced millions of displaced
Great.
people and destroyed multiple
Great.
important
This
large-scale
is actually,
infrastructure.
though,
The parties to the conflict
it's a
should
cool
strictly
thing
observe
this
international
happened,
humanitarian
as much
law,
as you shouldn't
follow
be
the
happy
principles of necessity,
about her.
distinction, and
I
proportionality,
told you Americans struggle
protect
to speak
civilians
English,
and
it's
civilian
not just Dylan.
infrastructure,
But he
and
speaks
provide
English
rapid,
well.
safe, and unimpeded humanitarian access in order
Well,
to
next time
lessen
I'm
the
done, I'm gonna be
suffering
like,
of
is he
civilians.
grammatically correct in English?
The international
The language
community
he
and the
has been
humanitarian
speaking for
institutions should honor the
entire
principles
during
of
his
humanitarian
life.
aid and step up efforts to help people affected, tied over difficulties.
No, it's okay. It's always okay to troll Americans. They are rich and powerful.
China attaches great importance to the humanitarian situation in Ukraine.
It's always morally correct.
At the beginning of the crisis, we put forward a 6-point initiative for preventing a massive humanitarian crisis, and have all along played a constructive role in easing the humanitarian situation. We have provided multiple batches of humanitarian supplies to Ukraine. Mr. President, China will stay committed.
Who's playing Overwatch 2?
Stay committed to the true multilateralism. Stay committed to the objective and just position, and will always stand on the side of dialogue, on the side of peace, and on the side of on the right side of history.
To be fair, Dom,
we are ready to work with Security Council members and relevant parties to continue playing a constructive role for the political settlement of the Ukraine crisis. Thank you, Mr. President.
Because usually, when they try to talk about stuff that is not themselves, they fail miserably. So it's okay. It's okay. Okay, what do we expect out of Mozambique? Come on. 1 out of 10.
I wish to thank the Albanian presidency for convening this briefing.
Watching memes of Lavrov defecting.
We also express our deep gratitude to the Secretary General for his invaluable insights. Mr. President, it is not redundant that we remind ourselves of the importance of multilateralism, fostering cooperation, partnership, interaction between states based on a shared system of norms and values. Multilateralism also involves consultation, dialogue, inclusion, respect, solidarity, and is guided by collectively developed rules that ensure sustainable and effective cooperation. More significantly, the importance of multilateralism lies in its ability to enable us, sovereign states, to solve complex challenges collectively that they could be not overcome individually. By nurturing peace before, during, and after conflicts, multilateralism contributes to sustainable and lasting peace. It is in this regard that the Security Council must play its crucial role in maintaining international peace and security by facilitating political process, protecting civilians, preventing wars, promoting human rights, and restoring the rule of law. Mr. President, this protracted conflict between Russia and Ukraine constitutes a grave risk to the maintenance of global peace and security. This, in essence, perfectly illustrates the struggle multilateralism faces. Despite numerous international appeals, including from this very Council, we are now entering the 574th day of hostilities with mounting civilian casualties and no clear end in sight.
Okay.
It is indeed a 21st century tragedy unfolding under our collective gaze and the scrutiny of the entire world. This conflict unfolds both on the battlefield and amidst a perplexed and divided
that's actually a good
pushing our contemporary multilateral
question, because I feel a lot of it was written by AI.
Our multilateral system, as we all can attest,
AI usually gives pussy answers. Have you noticed AI? It gives very cowardly answers to shit.
This ongoing crisis poses a serious threat to this foundational principle of global stability. Not only has the conflict caused immense suffering for Ukraine and its people, but it has also compounded global food
This speech was boring as fuck before AI was a thing. Okay, yeah, that's true. Can't blame the AI fully. Maybe it wasn't written by AI. Maybe it was written by advisors who
this conflict impedes our joint efforts to reach
who are paid more money than you will see in your entire life. What the fuck is this?
Development goals.
My name is not Lavrov. I don't wear glasses. We are doing everything to stop the war.
And jeopardizes our collective efforts toward non-proliferation.
Fair, true, actually.
Mr. President, of particular concern to Mozambique is the intensification of military rhetoric and the possibility of further escalation. It
Pussies.
is evident
Just pussies,
that the
most of
involved
these
parties
dogs.
continue to prioritize military strategies over dialogue
Like
and
at some point,
compromise,
if you don't dare
increasing
to
the risk
mention
of
who the
severe
aggressor is,
miscalculations.
I don't know if there's a
We
point of you
maintain that there
speaking.
can be no purely military resolution.
See, there can be no
to these
military
crises.
resolution. There has to be peace
Should
talks.
one
Let's
be
do another
pursued,
Minsk, guys. Let's
it
do
will
another Minsk.
weigh
And then when Russia breaks up
heavily
Minsk, what
on
we're
the
going to do is we're going to be like, hey
conscience
guys,
for
can we
generation to
can we
come.
maybe listen,
We
do this
remain
very smart
unyielding
thing,
in
okay?
our advocacy
Maybe we
for
could
political
have peace
and
talks.
negotiated
And then they're just going to
end to this
continue
conflict.
calling for peace talks. And
once
every
again
single time they do peace talks,
urge
Russia is going to
all
do the
parties
same
to
thing it did
silence
so
the
far
guns,
with peace talks,
engage
which
in
is
earnest
using them
and
as an
diplomatic
opportunity
efforts
to
aimed
be
at the
aggressive.
swift resumption
And they're going to continue
direct
doing this
negotiations.
until they
A lasting
actually
peace, consistent
get
with
Ukraine
the
into a
Charter,
position in
remains
which
the
it can't
sole
fight anymore.
viable solution. I thank you, Mr.
Unironically,
President.
that feels like a plan.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mozambique.
Oh,
And
he
now
stopped
I give
speaking.
the floor to His Excellency,
Who are we going to get now?
the Chancellor of Germany, Mr. Scholz.
Mr. President, colleagues, excellencies, it has been almost 19 months since Russia started a brutal war of aggression against its sovereign neighbor, Ukraine.
True.
Tens of thousands of soldiers and Ukrainian civilians have been killed.
True.
Countless Ukrainian children have been abducted.
True.
Russian troops have murdered, raped, and tortured. They are razing towns and villages to the ground. They are mining entire regions, turning cornfields into death traps. This war is taking place in Europe, but its repercussions are felt throughout the world. Russia has deliberately removed millions of tons of grains
Nice. You
and fertilizer
notice
from the world market, which
how the
countries around
second
the
they're
globe
not
need to
afraid to
guarantee
name
food security.
the aggressor,
Russia is
how the
deliberately
entire
targeting grain
speech
silos and port infrastructures.
is so much more
And Russia has
meaningful.
withdrawn unilaterally from the Black Sea
Like when they do
Grain
the whole thing with
Initiative,
like, both sides
triggering
should
more
have a
poverty and more food
conversation.
insecurity all over
Both
the
sides are
world.
suffering.
There is no justification for that. Any claims that sanctions are hampering Russian
iPad. Oh, the
exports
iPad
of
was
crops
great.
and
The iPad
fertilizer
was
are false.
absolutely
There are no sanctions
great.
impeding such exports. On the contrary, Russia dominates the global fertilizer market. 2022 was a record year for
Gay
Russian
criminals
wheat
amnesty, the agent of war
exports.
shit, yeah, that too. Okay.
The
Fair.
reason for the continued suffering in Ukraine and around the world is shockingly simple. Russia's president wants to follow through with his imperialistic plan to conquer his sovereign neighbor, Ukraine.
True.
Mr. President, the United Nations has expressed very clearly what it thinks of Russia's war of aggression, most
You're a
recently
serial rapist and
on the
murderer. That could be useful. Yeah,
23rd of
definitely.
February of this year. The General Assembly called for a
Now they're getting back
comprehensive,
to
just
Russia and
and
creating
lasting
havoc
peace.
there, so
This demand is directed
they
at
have a surplus
Russia.
now.
It
Ooh.
remains
Hey,
unanswered.
Minecraft.
Nothing rings out louder today than Russia's silence in response to this global call for peace. Some argue that this war could have been prevented by diplomatic means. In fact, France and Germany have held hundreds of meetings with Moscow and Kiev
Nice.
since the beginning of Russia's attack on eastern Ukraine in 2014.
True.
Our aim was to find a diplomatic solution that is in line with international law.
True.
All these endeavors failed because one party, Russia, chose war over diplomacy.
True.
But there has been no lack of diplomatic efforts. Some call for immediate
We are turning into
ceasefire.
Albania nationalists.
I acknowledge their good intentions.
Albanian
We
PM
all
has
want an
been
end to the killing today rather than tomorrow.
amazing.
And yet we must
throughout
beware
the
of
entire
seemingly
meeting.
easy solutions that promise peace in name only.
One party, Russia. Yeah, like
Peace without freedom is oppression.
my man's not being like
and peace
the
without justice
parties
is a dictate.
haven't been
In the
able to uphold
resolutions of the
deals.
General
No,
Assembly,
he's
we have
naming
laid
it.
out the path towards peace.
He's naming it. Thank you, Schultz.
Peace means respecting the UN Charter. Peace means respecting the territorial integrity and political independence of Ukraine.
By the way, his English is very, very good.
That is the
I've
promise
just
of UN Charter
kind of
gives to every
figured out
United
it's him.
Nations member state.
He's really, really good.
No one longs for peace more than the Ukrainians.
True.
The peace plan that the Ukrainian president has laid out is proof of that. The recent meetings in Copenhagen and Jeddah were important. This work should be continued. It should be continued in the pursuit of one goal, finding peace that respects the principles of the UN Charter. Mr. President, the more decisively we rally behind these principles, the more determined we are in pushing for a just peace, and the more united we are in our rejections of Russian aggression, the sooner this war will end.
True.
The sooner this human suffering will end in Ukraine and around the world.
Okay.
This goal is worth our utmost efforts. Thank you.
I thank the Chancellor of Federal Republic of Germany, His Excellency
Germans,
Mr.
impressive.
Olaf Scholz.
Germans and Frenches.
There are
Both
still
good
a
this time.
considerable number of speakers remaining
Both
on my list
good.
for
Both good.
this meeting.
Oh, it's not trans,
so
it's
I
actually
intend,
Croatian.
with concurrence of members of the Council, to suspend the meeting
What is the
until
point to all this blabbering? To be
15:30
fair, partially, I'm
or
not even sure.
3:30 p.m. for our American friends. So the meeting is suspending.
Wait, the meeting is suspending. I wasn't listening to him.
On the side of peace and with security.
Oh, should you do a little tiny click and like all of it goes back? But yeah, I'm not sure what they're trying
Since
to
the
do.
beginning of was to Mr. President is the
orders of the I thank the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, His Excellency Mr. Olaf Scholz. There are still a considerable number of speakers remaining on my list for this meeting, so I intend, with concurrence of members of the Council, to suspend the meeting until 15:30 or 3:30 p.m. for our American friends.
15:30, what do they mean? When is 13:30 for them? Yeah, I don't really know what they're trying to do. When you look at what has been done in Serbia, Germany is to date occupied by the US as much as entire Europe. Bro. Bro. Hey, there's something so fucked about watching all of this shit, you know? There's something so fucked. And it even is, I don't know, like I believe fully that Ukraine is gonna win this. I fully believe Ukraine is going to win this, and I fully believe that this will end in the victory. I don't think there's an alternative to it. But it's just the fact people are so fucking wild on this. Man, years after this is done, we're gonna look back and we're gonna be like, damn, the pieces of shit we had around. And we did. Russia must unconditionally withdraw all troops from the entire territory of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Russia's leaders must be held accountable for the crime of aggression. True. Absolutely based, absolutely true. Petr is so great. I love him so much. He's so good. He has been so strong on the entire topic. I love the way he has been influencing this. He has been really good. I'm so happy he's the president. The contender was, who was the contender? I can't remember his stupid name. But I know he was connected to pro-Russian side, and it was really worrisome. I'm so happy Petr won. Genuinely, I'm so happy to see him win. Zelensky posted on Rama.
But as far as you repeat it many times...
Wait, was the last post also from... No, it wasn't from
Zelensky.
Zelensky. This one is
The
all.
violation here is about President Zelensky speaking before the Council members. There is a solution for this if you agree. you stop the war and President Zelensky will not take the floor.
He is amazing.
But as far as...
He is amazing. I didn't expect him to be so strong. I never expected Rama to be so strong. He was, by the way, fun fact, I forgot to tell you this. Rama, he's connected to the Croatian president. You know our imbecile president, Milanovic? Milanovic is not even mentioned here. But Milanovic used to be the advisor of Rama for a while. He disappeared from our politics. Here it is. He entered the consulting business and worked as an advisor to Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama. For a while he was working there. We didn't, it's not that we didn't know about this, it's that no one really cared enough about him at the time. We had other people in politics to talk about. So no one really paid attention to where, Milanovic was. And then he returns to politics and everyone was like, where was Milanovic all of this time? He was an advisor to Edi Rama, which, it's kind of ironic that Edi went the path of being an amazing leader, and our dude went the path of just being full of shit. Kind of ironic. Maybe he should have advised himself. Global Lavrov emote. Report. But also, I have to be leaving soonish. Sergei Ivanenko from Belarus. What? What? Oh, you actually looked the dude up. You actually looked the dude up. Oh shit. Did he fall for some scam on some gaming shit? Is that what I'm seeing on his Twitter? Fair. Mama just responded with his entire fucking legal name. A pirated Barbie movie made at least 120 million rubles over the weekend in Russia. By the way, it was not allowed for showing in Russia, so pirate copies of the movie were aired in movie theaters. It's not that it wasn't allowed, it's that they didn't want to screen it. Like the company that made it didn't want it to be screened in Russia. On one of Russia's talk shows, they actually comment on this. One of them is like, oh guys, we're talking about banning the movie as if we had a choice to ban it. We didn't have a choice to ban it. We weren't allowed to show it in the first place. Ministry of Culture of Russia refused to release the Barbie movie because it does not meet the goals and objectives set by Putin to preserve and strengthen the traditional Russian spiritual and moral values. And then they stole it anyways and showed it. Cute. What did Thompson do on Twitch to get a live ban? As far as I know. Voila! Thank you for the sub gift. Thank you. Holy shit! I have to show you another piece of Croatian merch I have now. Okay, sub number 3. Check out what I have while we talk on Thompson getting banned. But basically, as far as I know, the conversation was about the... What was the name? The fencing woman from Russia. So she was refused a handshake, and then she went to be bitching because she was refused a handshake, right? And Thompson at the time talked about this, and he made what he thought was a simple little joke. Look what I have, by the way. What he thought was a simple little joke about her needing to be stabbed because fencing, right? He was like, ha ha ha, fencing thing. So, she shouldn't have gotten a handshake, she should have just gotten stabbed. Ha ha ha, I'm Thompson. But then Twitch, of course, saw this, and Twitch was like, is this man calling for violence? Is this man calling for violence? Do we want to allow this on the platform? And the answer was apparently no. So he got banned. Then, as far as I know, did he get banned off YouTube? But I think that was the copyright one. I think the Twitch one was just the stab one. And as far as I know, he has written the appeal, but it has not been approved. I know there was a whole Twitter thing where he made a Twitter post, and then we were sharing the Twitter post that he must be unbanned, but nothing really happened about it. So that's what I know. That's what I know. Yeah, I gotta go soon too. YouTube, I think YouTube was previously, I think his YouTube ban is maybe done now? I don't watch him on YouTube, I watch him on Kick, which by the way I can't sub on. Someone tell me how to fix it. I can't sub to him on Kick. I keep on trying to, and I gave all my card info, and it just keeps on loading. I don't know why it keeps on loading. It was doing the loading thing with donations too. The first time I donated to Yuri, I think. It was loading forever, and then I got a call from the bank, and they were like, hey, you need to approve this transaction, because it looks like someone hacked your account, right? So I approved the transaction. I was like, yeah, it is actually me doing it, and they allowed it to go through, but now they're not allowing me to do subs on Kick. Spaceman? Who's the spaceman? But yeah, absolutely, I have to be leaving. I have to be going soon. Tomorrow I'm having a very important ride early in the morning, so I'm hoping to be alive for that, and I'm hoping to survive it well. And then, what was I? So tomorrow we are missing the stream. We will be doing the stream on Friday though, and also I'm hoping to do the stream on Saturday, but those are going to be in the morning because I work the afternoon shift. I actually have to be working the afternoon shift, okay? So, old time, stream time, call it nostalgia. That's what we're gonna do. Ah, this is cute. So yeah, that's the plan so far. Hope it makes sense. So tomorrow, no stream. And then streams in old time on Friday and Saturday. Hopefully starting a bit earlier because I'm actually home like the whole before noon time. So, good luck with that. Also, I'm planning to edit few things. I know I need to edit the, sorry, I'm trying to write so I can't think. Okay. I know I need to edit the, holy shit, thank you for the sub. Thank you. Hey, I know I need to edit Discord, so I got some plans to do on Discord, and I know I need to add at least 2 commands that I've got a plan for, so wish me luck on that. If you have any ideas on what else to fix, tell me so I can fix it tomorrow, because tomorrow is my no stream day. Because if I don't do shit tomorrow, I'm probably just gonna be leaving it for the next day until forever. So, tomorrow's your one of chance, okay? I need to add a beer channel to Discord, I need to add a debate channel to Discord. I'm probably gonna group the channels into like nice little groups so we know where everything is, because right now it's quite chaotic. So send thoughts and prayers, my dudes. Send fucking thoughts and prayers. Also maybe a proper war channel wouldn't be hurting, so we don't just jumble everything into the usual chatting one. That's also the plan. And I think that's it. Dragon Rid? No. I'll have to watch it tomorrow when I'm free. I had no time today at all. I was at work, started the stream then, and then we watched the fucking You and Losers. So I'm hoping to watch it maybe even like now, while I'm having dinner. I'll see, but I'll have to watch it now. And yeah, that's about it. Raid starting soon. See you Friday before noon. Wake up early, okay? Stay strong. GG.